and welcome. You're watching India Market Open. The nation has woken up to some very sad news. The world, the country, India Inc. has lost one of its most precious titans of our times. The powerhouse, the legend Tata Sir has left behind a very solid legacy, and the nation mourns.
You know what really has struck me, of course, that at age 86 and last couple of days were in the hospital, and it's a life well lived, but the kind of emotional response from people who have not met Ratan Tata, might not have invested in Tata companies, might not be part of the corporate world, but yet everyone feels like they have lost someone they knew. Yeah. I think that's really part of the legacy. Because, I mean, I just think he traversed through all spheres, right? I mean, the daring acquisitions, you Tetley Tea, Chorus, Tata Steel, Chorus or JLR, or the zeal to revive Air India, yeah. Nano. I remember that line, a promise is a promise. But I think above all for me, right, 66% of everything that he did went to the philanthropic causes. I mean, this is what truly a combination of capitalism and charity looks like.
A nation without him is tough to imagine.
And the aggression that Tata got in terms of businesses. Prior to 2000, it was a big group, but it was a very slow group. You know, if you speak to market people, the stocks never moved or returns never came in. But 2000 onwards, the aggression that came in with the acquisition of Tetley, followed by you had the JLR, the Chorus, the 8 o'clock, which was acquired. You know, it just transformed the group as a very aggressive group.
And Sajid, of course, someone who has tracked, I think our executive editor Sajid Mangat, who's tracked the Tatas and this journey for how many years? Sajid, 20 plus years.
20 plus years.
We've been looking at
it. Also
at how they have been doing.
The time that India was becoming a global superpower in some ways, right? So,
but let's get in somebody who's looked at it so closely for so many years now, right? And somebody who we all look up to hear about how does he think about businesses, about businessmen, and more. Ramesh Damani, market veteran, with us on the show. Ramesh, so good of you to take the time out and speak to us early this morning. Thank you. How do you feel about this? Because as we were saying, that it's almost like a personal loss to every single Indian.
Yeah, good morning, Niraj. Thank you. And your guys are absolutely right. We woke up to a Saturday today, no question about it. I think in many ways he was, of course, the conscious keeper for India Inc. He was, of course, an entrepreneur, a pioneer, visionary, as all of you correctly stated. But more importantly, I think he was the conscious keeper for this India Inc. You know, there's a favorite prayer of mine by Saint Francis of Assisi, and the last three lines of the prayer say, "It is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in death that we are born to eternal life." Not only was he wholesale in terms of his giving of his money, his time, his abilities, but also the kind of structure that he's built up and carried on for the Tata. He's a true apostle of Tata. I think his life and legacy, as you all have correctly pointed out, will live on. So RIP to a great Indian avatar and a great Indian hero.
Mr. Damani, I was listening to one of the last interviews of Mr. Ratan Tata, and he was asked, how do you want to be remembered? And he said, as someone who made a difference. I think that's one goal completely achieved, no matter in what sphere, and not only in just business, and touching so many people's lives, isn't it?
Absolutely. And difference in terms of lasting difference. It's not like a temporary difference or a stock price difference, as the last street is prone to say. You know, the one thing that's unappreciated from my office at the last street on BSC to Bombay House is a very short walk to there. And one of the underappreciated factors, at least for the market, has been that we often talked about the public sector leading the market up or the banks leading the market higher. What we don't appreciate is how well the Tata group of companies have done based on the framework he set. I mean, Trent has become a household name today. TCS continues to power ahead. Titan has become a nationally brand name. Tata Consumer has done well. Indian Hotels has done well. So part of the leadership in this bull market that we're seeing has come from Tata House and originated in Bombay House. And of course, the plan that he set in motion 91-92 when India liberalized first.
Right. We also have Mukund Rajan, author of the brand Custodian, My Years with the Tatas, joining us. Hi, good morning, Mukund. It's Samina. It's with great sorrow that we report this morning the loss of a very precious gem to the nation. You of all, and I know this, have worked so closely with Tata ji. You want to just talk to us about that experience, the learnings, the life with the Tatas, the glorious life of the man himself.
You know, it's a great loss. I think he was somebody who really encouraged young talent. I joined his office as a rookie in my early 20s in the 1990s. That was, of course, a period of tremendous pressure, I think, that he was going through, trying to ensure that the Tatas came unscathed through the period of liberalization and the entry of a large number of multinationals into the Indian market, all of them challenging the flagship Tata companies like Tata Motors and Tata Steel. And then through the 2000s, you saw the group really taking wings. I think once the home turf had been defended well, I think through the 2000s, Ratan Tata really set the ambition for the group to become a global enterprise. And you saw the way in which the Tata Group really grew tenfold in revenues from the early 2000s till the time he actually hung up his boots. But more than, I think, his determination to ensure Tatas are successful, you really warmed to the man, the human being, the person that he was, somebody who really cared about India, cared about the poor in this country. And obviously, as a philanthropist, as the chairman of India's largest charities, there was an enormous amount of good that he was able to do. So, working closely with somebody like that and watching the way he thought about business and the way it needed to be prosecuted was an incredible learning experience for me, for which I'll be ever grateful to him.
Mukund, Sajid here, I clearly remember the kind of auction fight that happened for Chorus. If you can take us through, that entire process where he wanted Chorus and he went on to aggressively bid for Chorus.
So I think he was very keen that Tata Steel really sort of bloom as a company that had enormous capability, that had already cemented its position in the Indian market. And he was a little nervous that opportunity after opportunity was being missed by the company to really expand overseas. I remember seeing notes from him on the progress that rival groups, including ArcelorMittal, were making at the time. And he just felt that management needed a bit more ambition and boldness. I suspect he was not very pleased eventually with the outcome of the Chorus bid, because we acquired it at a time and at a price that in retrospect turned out perhaps to be not the greatest of moves. And for a long, long time after that, Tata Steel has tried to sort of repair some of the stress that produced for its balance sheet. But I think just in terms of the challenge that he set out to the management and the determination to succeed with one major move for this particular company, I think the management worked in tandem with him, and eventually they succeeded in the bid. But sometimes, you can get these things wrong. And unfortunately, luck was not on his side. Soon after you had the global financial crisis, you soon discovered that banks would be fair weather friends. And a lot of the debt that the company racked up for many years later had to be repaid at a high price.
Ramesh, it's interesting though, and just taking a leaf from what Mukund Rajan just said, right? That the same thing was spoken about when JLR was acquired. For the longest time, the Achilles heel for Tata Motors, and then turning out to be the driving force for Tata Motors. So in some sense, it's not just as much about what an individual decision might have done to a particular company, but just the whole will of thought, as Mukund Rajan put out, that once the home turf was guarded well, it took wings on the global arena, and the kind of acquisitions, even the hotel acquisitions that have been done on the global scale. It's just astounding what the man thought for the Tata Group and for the nation.
I mean, Niraj, as you correctly point out, he was a pioneer. And I think today, if India Inc. looks further and sees better, is because they're standing on shoulders of giants like him. So you're absolutely right. He had a visionary thought and the ability to put money on the table. But I think ultimately, as we've all pointed out, what really mattered is that he was a true apostle of the Tata culture, the Tata values. And I think India needs to incorporate his lessons. There were a couple of scandals during his tenure, one of them being Tata Finance, one of being, of course, the terrorist attack in Mumbai that happened. And the way he reacted to that, with the correct moral principle, not sweeping it under the ground, taking charge of, paying back the shareholders of Tata Finance, even though he was not obligated to do that. I think these are extraordinary judgments. in what was actually the Tata's blackest days turned out to be their finest hours, because the reinstatement of the principles and the vision that the Tata Group has had since the founding of Jamshedji Tata a few hundred years back.
Mukund, I think you've had the opportunity to spend time close up with Mr. Ratan Tata, and a lot of our viewers today may want to understand the kind of person. Of course, someone who looked at philanthropy, looked at the greater good, but someone who also lived a very simple life himself, despite, I think luxury being part of his life from day one. Very simple in his taste, isn't it? What was your own learning of the person?
He was actually quite a shy individual, somewhat of an introvert. Certainly not somebody who was part of the Bombay cocktail party circuit. He had a very close and small social group. And really, Tata's in the business to a great extent was his life. Remember, he carried the surname and he felt very deeply, passionately about the need to really take this group to higher levels. He also walked into very big shoes when he succeeded his predecessor, J.R.D. Tata. And you will recollect that there were question marks about his ability to really grow this business after what J.R.D. Tata had already done. So really, Tata's was his life for him. And yet all the power, the glory, the pomp that surrounds the office of the chairman of India's largest corporate house, he never let that sort of go to his head. He was a very simple, grounded individual. I often joke that he was one of those rare Indian corporate leaders who at the airport would insist on carrying his own bags. He didn't have an entourage. So the man was very simple in his taste. He's also very, very much fun to be with, a tremendous sense of humor. He's an extraordinary mimic. I remember this one time when in a Tata Sons board meeting, he often used to doodle when meetings used to go on a little longer than they needed to. And he drew this wonderful caricature of three of his colleagues, much older than him, gentlemen, venerable directors of Tata Sons in their 80s, all bald. And he drew these three bald pates from the back, from the rear. These were Messrs. Sabawala, Sunawala, and Setna. And later he showed it to them and they were really pleased with his artistic efforts. And he actually made a print of this and sent it out to the three of them, titling it The Three S's by Ratan Tata. So a man who was, great fun to be with, very simple, very decent, fun-loving human being.
You have a smile on your face when you talk about him so fondly, and this just goes to show the kind of impact he's left on people like you who was lucky and fortunate to work with him. Also, one line that I read that said, one wet monsoon evening, not many moons ago, dog lover Ratan Tata had decreed that any strays outside the Tata headquarters in downtown Mumbai be allowed shelter. He goes on to say, the writer, that some never left, but the man himself is no more. When did all this start? Do you think, we talk about Tata ji with a lot of fondness when we talk about philanthropy and the amount of work he's done to give back to the nation, to the humans. Was this early on, or did this come with age, time, and I guess just life?
I guess a bit of both, but he'd always been a dog lover. He had this first Alsatian that early on in his chairmanship, he took in a dog that he called Tito. And he became very, very close to it. And it's a bit to do with also the fact that, at that rarefied level of being the head of a very large corporate enterprise, when you have very few friends, very few people you can open up with, you are looking yet for companionship. And remember, he was a bachelor, so there's very little close family within his quarters. So he became very attached to Tito. And I think years later, when Tito passed on, he brought in two more dogs, Tito and Tango. And that remained an abiding passion for him to really, take care of dogs. Wherever he went, if he saw dogs, he'd sort of warm to them and they would warm to him. And he insisted later on that in Bombay House as well, a shelter be created for the strays that were around Bombay House. All of them were provided collars. So really a man who cared about the well-being of pretty much all living things. And in that context, let me also say that a great believer in environmental protection. It was his doing that led to CI, the Confederation of Indian Industry, creating his environment division. He was, I think, the only Indian industrialist who was involved at the Earth Summit way back in 1992 in drafting an important seminal document for global industry called Changing Course. So somebody who really was concerned about life and the quality of life in all its dimensions for all living beings, certainly including human beings, but also animals.
Mukund, take us through, the way he planned the entire succession for the entire group, not just from the corporate side of it, but also from the philanthropy side of it. How he brought in some of the good professionals and corporate heads to be part of those philanthropy, Vijay Singh or Venu Srinivasan heading those trusts, which is now as vice chairperson of those trusts.
Well, I don't think it would be fair for me to say very much because I was not privy to some of the thought process. Some of those appointments have happened in recent years when I'd lost touch with him. But I would say this, that he was not somebody who at all was concerned about family, about religion or community. He always looked out for the best person for the job. So expectations, for instance, that succession would happen within the family or succession would happen necessarily within the Parsi community, I think were quite unfounded. And he's demonstrated that repeatedly in the leadership roles that he offered a number of people, both from within the group as well as lateral hires that were made into Tata Sons, into various Tata companies. So I don't think from a succession perspective, he would have been concerned about the genetics, but he was certainly concerned about merit. And that is something that I think he strived to do. Obviously, there were colossal and tragic failures, in particular the fallout between him and Cyrus Mistry, which I think led to a series of events which perhaps he had not planned. But one can only hope that now, in the wake of his passing, good sense will prevail and the right thing will be done in terms of ensuring that both in the Tata Group as well as the charities, his thought process that the best person for the job should be appointed always.
I'm glad we're talking about all parts of his life, the challenging ones as well, because obviously such a storied life comes with its ups and downs, but how he dealt with those challenges is what's important. And Mr. Damani, I want to come to you on that. At the end of the day, when we look at the legacy, and we've spoken about the philanthropy, we've spoken about the charitable businesses, the interest in startups, but if you had to sum up the kind of wealth creation and contribution to India, the Indian economy, your top software company, your cutting edge automobile company, of course, every side of the business which has been covered. How would you sum that up?
I mean, it starts not with him actually, 100 years ago with the Tata legacy and setting up Tata Iron and Steel and Indian hotels at the time when it was a funny idea to do that. I think he carried the legacy forward that Jamshedji did and JRD did by internationalizing the group. That was the first thing he did. And by focusing on the wealth creation, the return on capital, which ultimately led to it becoming the most serious conglomerate out of India. And as I mentioned earlier to you also, that a large part of this bull market has been led by Tata shares. That's a bit underappreciated because they always do well. And these are the shares that investors go for safety. In good times, in bad times, investors, I think they have the most loyal shareholder base that I can think of any company in India. There are people who are legendary who never sell the Tata shares no matter what. And I think for good reason, because they've always been a custodian for shareholders and the shares over time have appreciated, many-fold. So I think part of his legacy, of course, was that he remade the group in his own image by internationalizing the group, by making sure that they focused on earnings and making sure that they delivered for the shareholders too, apart from, of course, the philanthropic and the other causes that he was known for.
Ramesh, a question, and this could well have been to Mukund Rajan as well, but Ramesh, I'm asking this to you because you would have looked at this from an investing lens for such a long time. It would take some effort for a group to be the first name when it comes to anything related to ESG valuations, right? No matter what happened to profits, no matter what happened to revenues, but when you speak to every global investor that when they think of investing into a Tata group, they are like, everything else notwithstanding, The ESG quotient is completely clear. Corporate governance is extremely clear. And there are many groups like that. But this one always kind of came out as first amongst equals. It would take some serious effort, right, Ramesh? Decade after decade to maintain that and come out trumps. I mean, from an investor's lens, Ramesh, what would go behind such a thing?
Yeah, Niraj, I think the thing that will be examined in business schools and by corporate analysts is what happened in Tata Finance around the turn of the century, when they had a bad management team out there that had milked the basic finance of the company by investing in speculative stocks on the last street, as a matter of fact. And when a whistleblower pointed this out, a thorough investigation was committed. They realized what had happened. And instead of sweeping it under the club and saying, under the carpet and saying, well, our liability is limited to the extent of our contribution to the capital, I think Tata's came out with a statement saying that we will hold responsibility for everything, no matter we are legally responsible or not. In fact, if you read the latest book by Mr. Gopal Krishna and Harish Bhatt, they even kept a helicopter on standby. If someone in outer India wanted money at a moment's notice, they would fly the money in there. As it turned out, the trust in the Tata brand name was so strong that no one really requested the money and everything went smoothly. But I think there are very few iconic brands in India where people instinctively know that everything is going to be fair and everything is going to be above board. And I have no doubt that Tata's, and thanks a large part to Mr. Ratan Tata's legacy, stands as one of those brands in India that is undiminished, undiluted. And I think as one of the papers said this morning, he was a true Ratan.
Right, he definitely was a true Ratan. Mukund, I think Niraj talked to Ramesh about ESG, and I know how close to your heart ESG is. Two topics that are close to your heart, of course, Ratan Tata and ESG. You want to talk to me and tell me about the impact he's left on you as an individual and the fact that you actually work in the ESG space. Would you thank Tata Sir for that, or the career that he charted out for you in more ways than one? And also, just for our viewers, one memory that's been, etched in your mind forever, which was with Tata Sir.
So one of the reasons I joined the Tatas through the Tata Administrative Service, and he in fact interviewed me for the Tata Administrative Service, he was the chairman of the selection committee in 1994, was the fact that Tatas were one of those rare Indian groups at that time that were genuinely committed to the cause of the environment. And environment had been the subject of my master's and doctoral dissertations at Oxford University when I came back and interviewed with him. The one thing that I will remember is after he invited me to join his office, I remember telling him that, Mr. Tata, I need you to know that, I have a master's and a doctorate, but that's in political science. I don't have an MBA. So are you really sure that you want to go ahead with this appointment? And will I really be able to add value to you? And his response to me was something that will be forever etched in my mind. He said, to succeed in the corporate world, all you need is good common sense. And that's something that was so true about the man. He followed his instinct and he did these huge, big, bold, ambitious moves. I don't think he crunched the numbers like some people necessarily would, but he had a broad vision and a broad sense of where he wanted to take the group, and that rubbed off on all of those people who joined and worked for the Tatas, worked for him. We didn't work for money. Tatas are never the best paid masters, but you work because you knew that this is a group that is dedicated to doing the right thing, and you could sleep easy at night knowing that corporate governance was in hand and no shortcuts would be taken, no compromises on ethics would take place.
KK Mistry also with us, Chairman of HDFC Life Insurance, joining us on the phone line. Mr. Mistry, thank you so much for taking out the time to speak with us today as we pay tribute, I think, to one of the greats, definitely when it comes not just to corporate India, but to laying out an example of how to function in corporate life. What is your favorite Ratan Tata story, Mr. Mistry?
Well, I would put it this way, that for me, it is impossible, not just for me, but to my mind, for anybody else, to describe the enormous legacy that Mr. Ratan Tata leaves behind. He was a legend like nobody else. We've seen so many people who made a name for themselves, but nobody like Mr. Ratan Tata, who achieved so much and yet lived such a simple life. He was a man with incredible vision. He was truly, in my view, an outstanding and extraordinary human being who lived an extremely, very, very simple life despite his huge achievements. He had so much conviction in what he did. And under his leadership, the Tata Group grew from strength to strength. He had the vision and courage to make some extraordinarily successful acquisitions for the Tata Group. If you remember in those days, early 2000s, mid 2003, 4, 5, Tata's did a spate of acquisitions, whether it was in Tata Motors, where they acquired JLR, whether it was in Tata Motors, where they acquired Chorus, or earlier in Tata Consumers, where it was Tetley. He took India on the global stage, and in those days, nobody could imagine that an Indian company could go abroad and acquire such global companies. You know, I remember many years ago, probably 10, 12 years ago, I was driving from Budapest to Prague, from Hungary to Czechoslovakia, and I remember that at two places along the way, we saw boards of Tata Group, which in those days for an Indian company to be seen overseas was extraordinary. And I think really what separated him from any other legend was his humility, his simplicity. Despite creating so much wealth for the community and the country, he lived a very simple life. He was a simple man, very philanthropic, always wanting to help people. He helped so many startups. He encouraged the youth of the country. And he really had the good of the country at heart. That's the way I would describe him.
Most certainly. Well, all three of you, fortunate enough to see whether at Budapest to Paris or in personal life or through investments. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining in today and giving us your thoughts. Really appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for this. And, you know, I mean, viewers, really, I mean, we mourn the demise of the great man, and we celebrate all that he's done for the country, because it's truly a thank you to Sri Ratan Tata from a grateful nation.
Can I give you an example of how I saw the impact of Ratan Tata 3 days ago? He has funded a company called Goodfellas, which is for the help of senior citizens. And I met a woman whose autistic son in his 20s is now employed with Goodfellas, has a full-time job and helps take care of elderly citizens. And she said that this young man feels so fulfilled because he has something to do. And he takes care of elderly citizens who have no one in their lives. I mean, that's a real-life example today of what Ratan Tata has done.
Yeah.
It's
I
just
think,
amazing.
you know, we talk about touching lives, and I woke up this morning, and if you look at social media, it's full of people who don't know him at all. But there's every single person on my feed as well has a post mourning the loss of this legend. And even talking about the message that was put out about a day ago when there were concerns about his ill health, I don't think anyone wanted to believe it, right? Because the minute the post came that he's okay, we all were relieved almost.
Yeah, you know, just one last point from my end. And truly, we should celebrate all walks of achievers, sports people, freedom fighters, everybody. Truly, we should. But it is these moments wherein India should truly celebrate capitalism too, because it is people like Ratan Tata and others which drove economic growth, created jobs, and made India to an extent what it is today.
Wealth creation, nation building. Charu joins us live. Okay, sorry, Sajid.
I just wanted to
just
share a experience which I had, because I've been going to Bombay House, which is the headquarters of Tata, right? And in early 2000s, when I moved to Bombay, and I went into that big lobby, and I saw dogs sitting there, and I was a little surprised. You know, I was new to Bombay and to Bombay House legacy. Let me put it this way, and then I realized that, you know, Mr. Tata was a big dog lover, and all these dogs are taken care of. And when the entire Bombay House went for renovation and it came back, there was a special shelter made for these dogs. And these dogs, even after Mr. Tata stepped down as chairman of Tata Sons, they stayed on. But, you know, Mr. Tata had an office just across the street at Hutatma Chowk. And these dogs used to go there in the morning to meet him, and then used to come back.
So you've obviously interacted with him one-on-one. What was he like as a person? Was he truly very shy and or was he as aggressive as some of the decisions he made?
So there has been lots of requests that we put out as media people for interviews.
Yeah. Was he TV friendly?
He was not TV friendly. It's, I think, very rare, 4 or 5 interviews that he may have given in his entire lifetime, which is there. And he's very shy. He will speak to you. He will be very soft, and you have to really, concentrate to, to listen to him in that. The only time even during the crisis of Cyrus, he maintained a silence. Means he dignified silence. It was a big fight which his team was fighting against Cyrus across all the boardrooms, across all especially AGMs and SGMs that were called by Cyrus, and where he was putting his front out there, and he was maintaining silence.
I've, as a cub reporter, had the opportunity to try and get a bite. He was very sweet and did give a bite. So always, that's one lucky thing. But to the now and here and what's going to happen today, through the day, of course, it's a state funeral for Ratan Tata. Charu joins us live from his residence in Colaba. Charu, there will be an opportunity for the public to also pay respects to Mr. Tata. Give us all of those details.
Right now we are outside his residence in Colaba, and for now what the situation is that there's a line of press, media personnel, and after that there is a line of sort of ordinary people and the people of the city who want to pay their respects. However, nobody has been allowed to go near or inside the residence as of yet, but the preparations to take him to NCPA and to do other formalities are still going on. For example, an ambulance was just entering his residence. There are police vans and police buses. There are other security personnel and people also deployed at the right places. People are trying hard, and people are working to not let any law and order situation arise, or to cause any sort of crowding in an inappropriate public area. So things are moving in a smooth fashion here. A lot of ordinary people are here. However, they are not allowed inside or near the residence for obvious reasons. And there was recently a band also entering his residence to pay the last respect and salute. And some near and dear people are also entering and leaving the premises, and we are going to be trying to talk more on that. We are going to be trying to talk to the people who are leaving the premises, and we have also been informed that there could be a parking related issue at the NCPA as well. So the police has spoken to the media about taking care of the restrictions that would be imposed on the public regarding the parking facility and other things, so that there is no situation arising at the NCPA venue as well. So we'll keep you updated on what other developments take place.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Charu. So we'll, of course, cover all the reactions coming in through the day on Mr. Ratan Tata and the nation paying tribute. But let's get on with the business of the day. Because life does move on. TCS numbers will be out today, so that's one big one as well. But I'll just quickly set up for you what global cues look like. Very, very positive. In short, the Dow rallying nearly 400 points overnight, and the Fed minutes helped. September meetings minutes definitely helped with that. So the Dow up, tech stocks making a roaring comeback. Bonds have inched up higher, and you've seen the 10-year at 4.07 as a result. So the Fed minutes largely indicating that a majority of the members are supporting a larger rate cut, but there is some dissonance there, which is why perhaps yields are also jumping up. Crude has settled remarkably, and concerns over an imminent attack have eased from Israel on Iran's oil facilities, with the Brent at $74. Asia looking good at open at least, and Asian markets following US cues. Look at the Hang Seng's recovery, about 3% up now after a very tough day for Chinese markets overall. India implied open in the positive last I saw, and 106 points up. So we're set for a good trading day. I think the fund flows were also decent yesterday. FIIs have continued selling 4,500 crores, but DIs coming in and buying 3,500 crores. So after a bit of a rough day, I would say, at least you're set for a good
but we've been set for a good day for the last few days, but I think yesterday's close was, I think, disappointing. So what happened on Tuesday, we closed at the day's high point. Wednesday, we've closed at today's low point with the later selling that actually took the Nifty sub 25,000. And I think that was a bit of a disappointment if you were a bull on the street, despite the fact that the policy was largely positive or in line with what the street was expecting. And we saw that reaction to the policy right after when the markets gained, sectors gained. But towards the close, it was consumption that led the losses, which came in as a surprise to me, to be fair. But of course, the good news was, and if you want to look at the cup as half full, broader markets did okay. They outperformed the benchmark, went home with a gain of nearly 1%. There could be some jitters that have surfaced in the second half of trade yesterday with China's fiscal policy or stimulus meet that's lined up for the 12th of October. But 4 out of 5 Nifty stocks were from the FMCG stock sector that led the losses. ITC, HUL, Britannia, Nestle had it quite painful. Cement stocks remained weak. IT stocks traded marginally higher to close the day ahead of earnings reporting that starts with TCS today, but was the 4th consecutive day of gains coming in for the IT pack. A couple of stocks that stood out, but just before that, real estate was quite the star. It gained about 2% in trade yesterday on largely positive quarterly trends for the sector. We, in fact, caught up with Purvankara and Signature Global and get an understanding that the business for the real estate sector is not looking too bad just yet, on back of which potentially buying was seen in counters across the SPAC. A few stocks that stood out. Tata Communication declined 11% from its recent life highs last week. It was down 3% yesterday. DVs, Torrent and Escorts, HDFC, AMC had a good run on brokerage notes. Those stocks were up in the range of 4 to 8%. Ashok Leyland saw a big cut of 4% on back of a CLSA downgrade. Niraj, so it's over to you. We're setting ourselves up for a good start this morning. But like I said to Tamanna, we've been setting ourselves up for a good start pretty much every day this week.
Afternoon is where the game
changes. Do you think it's going to sustain? Do you think that's a good chance the Bulls may take it home today?
Yeah, I mean, the template was always sell the rise, right, in the last 2 weeks. And yesterday kind of showed that the market is not wanting to quite chase a higher high. So that is a bit of a problem. But a few quant indicators indicate that the bottoms are not too far off. So therefore, even if you don't want to chase highs, maybe it might not be a bad idea to stay off very large leverage lows now. We were talking about not going for leverage longs 2 weeks back. Now, we're close to the period wherein very large leverage shorts may not be a great idea either. So that is one thing. And from amongst pockets, day before yesterday as well, while the market was a bit tipsy-turvy on Friday as well, IT was showing some strength. I reckon if IT could actually be the bulwark, and we'll talk about TCS a bit later on when we talk about stocks, but watch out for IT. I think there is something happening out there in terms of buying on the, and the options activity indicates that maybe there could be some bottom fishing happening there. And just one thing, guys, I mean, you know, since the earnings season kickstarts in full earnest today, and we can look at various different cuts and edits, but I think the MK note was interesting. They are saying that this quarter we'll see a sector divergence unlike some others that we've seen, because their overall top line growth for the universe is 3% with a flat PAT growth. But the point is, this is being dragged down in their universe by 2 sectors, cement, unusually pronounced seasonality, and energy companies because of a high base. If you skim these 2 out, the rest of the universe probably reports a 13% PAT growth. So if MK is right, you know the universe is where you bet on the long side or bet on the short side, if you will, based on the results. Since the result season starts today, these are certain pockets that you got to keep in mind if you're trading results individually.
You know, I think one reason why we might be seeing that selling pressure intensifying towards close is because, and for whatever it's worth, we've talked about this to our analysts too, recommending that don't sleep on positions anymore because the global setup is so uncertain and we don't know when things change. And I think the advice largely has been to close positions intraday, and of course don't go too leveraged. 20%, cut your leverage positions down to 20% if you're trading at 100% at this stage. Another quick one on tech, Niraj. The reason I think you're seeing a little bit of low-level buying is because in the September rally, tech was left out. It didn't participate in the last 1,000-odd point movement on the index, remember? And also what a few analysts like Nuvama have said that the downgrades have already been priced in after last quarter. So there's very little pain, you'd imagine, for the sector to go. Of course, on the negative, the number of deals, the number of big deals, a pool of limited big deals is rather limited. So only few will gain. But that could be one more reason. Because of the limited downside from here on and the fact that these stocks haven't participated, you are seeing action on the IT pack, a little bit of action relative to the rest of the market. But we are in the start of the earnings season. A recent new listing, Western Carriers, has had a phenomenal run since it listed on the exchanges. Also did quite well in trade yesterday. It was up 5% as we had it. Numbers were reported and numbers were good. The street should be pleased with what they've seen. Revenue was up 5% to come in at 422 crores. EBITDA came in at 13.2% at 35 crores. And margins have also improved quite well, coming in at 8.38% versus 7.79%. So there's an uptick on the margin front, and profits have also gone up about 8% in terms of growth. So all in all, it's been a good quarter for Western Carriers. The stock was up 5% yesterday. May or may not see a further reaction to the counter. Pardon me, it's actually, it was up 5% in yesterday's day of trade. Well, the other two that are on my radar, and this one is a big one, it's Adani Enterprise. Of course, this is a significant news development. They've launched a QIP, and the floor price of this QIP is 3,017 rupees a piece. It's a fairly large one. In fact, they're looking to raise significant capital through this QIP. So watch out for Adani Enterprise in today's trade. Like we've seen for the company, any sort of supply coming in has gotten lapped up, and how within a few minutes of that launch. Well, the other one, small company, but good to mention because order wins usually move counters in the broader market. PNC Infratech, they've bagged a pretty big order to the tune of 2,090 crores from the City and Industrial Development Corporation of Maharashtra. We will try and talk to PNC Infratech to get an understanding of the timeline and whether this order is a one-off or it's a recurring order. But for now, sentimentally a positive, guys, on PNC Infratech.
And a few more to look at this morning, just quickly going through. And of course, TCS is there at the forefront because numbers, I don't expect any downside for Tata Group stocks simply because the whole succession or the running of the companies has been very smooth for many years. Shouldn't really be a problem over there. TCS will be looked at the merit of its own numbers. Those numbers will continue to be put out today. The board meeting will take place. But the other stocks that I'm looking at, Britannia for one. So Britannia and BEL Group have inaugurated a new cheese factory in Maharashtra. In fact, we have a ground report from there which will play out later in the show and a conversation with Varun Berry. The factory has been set up with a 220 crore investment and will be making the Laughing Cow cheese products. That's a thumbs up for Britannia. Total production capacity will be 6,000 tons per annum for natural cheese varieties and 10,000 tons per annum for processed cheese. And the facility leverages Britannia's robust milk procurement program. Now, FMCG counters have not been the most loved, but today could be a good day, perhaps, for Britannia. Star Health Insurance is the other one, and this is a huge data breach. Yeah. And this is a worrying story on more fronts than just what is going to happen to the stock today, frankly. The company put out a statement finally on the data breach, confirming what was being reported all over social media. They have said that the company was a victim of a targeted cyber attack. Details of customers were basically exposed in that data breach and out in the public domain. Company says the operations remain unaffected and services continue without disruption. But like I said, the real concern over here is why should your insurance data as a customer be hacked so easily? And I would expect some kind of a negative impact on the stock. 361 is the other one that I'm looking at. UBS has initiated coverage with a target price of 12.50. So an upside there of about 24%. They're excited because they say core annual recurring revenue will grow faster versus overall business. Core profitability expected to improve with better operating leverage as well, and new business avenues is what excites UBS. They say HRIs and global business could provide an upside. They use value based on dividend discount model to look at a valuation of 42 times December 25 PE, but that's not bothering UBS too much. And we have seen the space largely rebounding. AMC is in focus yesterday at least. So 361 could be in focus today.
Yeah, very interesting note. Very interesting note, by the way. So watch out for that. Speaking of interesting notes, maybe I start off with a note and then the two last stocks on my radar. The first one is the first stock on my radar, the Citi note on PB Fintech. Now, they've come out and upped the target price from 1700 to 1925. Multitude of reasons, including giving a higher multiple for PB Fintech as well. And they believe that amongst all the issues that are there, the stock may come out trumps on them. Momentum in new businesses, it all strengthens positioning, etc. So keep an eye out for PB Fintech. That's the first stock on my radar. Let's see if it's a bit of an uptick. I'll watch out for Larsen & Toubro, simply because there is an ANI note, ANI report which says, so two parts here. One, Cabinet has cleared an 80,000 crore defense deals for Predator drones and nuclear submarines. Viewers, remember, drones, as per the note, is all import. So none of the domestic companies benefit out of it. So that's first part. The second part is that there is CCS has approved the manufacturing of 2 nuclear-powered attack submarines in Vizag. And the ANI note says that very likely that L&T will play a large part into that. So therefore, watch out for Larsen in case this is a positive reaction. And last but not the least, TCS numbers coming out today. I just thought just a thought that came in. Samina was talking about how tech has seen a bit of a downtick recently. Tamanna spoke about how these Tata Group stocks may not get impacted too much. But look at what TCS is doing currently. 25 times FY27 EPS, a minor premium to Infosys versus a historical premium of 10 to 15%. I think this 1% constant currency growth is already baked in, because if you look at the TCS performance the last 1 month, down 5.5%. Look at HCL Tech, look at Infosys, look at Wipro, look at Midcap IT. All of them have actually done well relative to TCS. So I think the negatives is priced in. If they give out slightly positive commentary about the second half, you might well see TCS do well. So bear that in mind.
And visually, they might not look too bad because a BSNL deal ramp up will reflect on the revenue. So the street may get excited either which ways, right? But there's so much happening in stocks. Implied Nifty is indicating to a good start this morning. But like we said, we'll try and not get too carried away by that. Lots of action in the F&O space as well. Agam is standing by with more on it. Agam, what do we have this morning? Are we setting ourselves up for another good morning, but may not be such a great afternoon?
Yeah, it's turning out to be a tricky couple of sessions. Because while we do see strength earlier on in the day, that's been sold into. And at the moment, it does seem like a lot of investors are on the fence as to what direction they should be taking. It's very evident in the numbers too, because we aren't really looking at too much change in your open interest when it comes to the futures. A relative lack of taking decisions at the moment is what we're seeing. The open interest for the Nifty has declined by around 1.3%, which isn't significant. But the Bank Nifty, on the other hand, it was a weekly options expiry yesterday, and we did see a little bit more of an increase in open interest, but even as the underlying remained flat. Now, as we move in, there is a little bit more writing around calls as compared to puts, when that's evident in your overall open interest. While 25,000 becomes and remains a crucial mark around which you can expect the Nifty to, move to and fro. It's going to be a wait and watch whether or not it becomes a near-term support or resistance for now. Well, moving on in terms of stocks, it was a mixed day of trade, but there were, more shorts than longs. Shree Cement, Havells and Federal Bank did see shorts coming in. Tata Chemicals and Max Financial, on the other hand, saw advances. And among stocks which saw unwinding, again, it was a day of trade where we saw short covering in Dr. Lal Pathlabs, Oracle Financial Services, Metropolis and Escorts. IDFC, on the other hand, looking at a little bit more weakness. Today is the Nifty weekly options expiry. All eyes on 25,000. And should we see the Nifty open above that mark and sustain above that mark for the first 1.5 hours, you never know. We may very well see about a short covering taking the markets even higher. But that's a wait and watch.
Okay, so wait and watch today, but at least the setup looks fairly positive, and the question is whether it will sustain more than anything else. Kunal Shah joining us this morning, Senior Technical and Derivative Analyst at Sharekhan. We're also speaking with Niraj Shah of Ratan Manharlal. Welcome to both of you. Very good morning to you. And Kunal, let me really come to you on where you see the Nifty today. I mean, becoming a bit difficult to predict, I must say. But what would be the call?
Good morning. I think definitely it is a very tricky market at the current levels, where we have seen correction from 26,200 to 24,800 mark. So yesterday we witnessed some rally on the higher end, but in the second half it was completely sold out. Now this is where the resistance for Nifty comes in. So if you add the technical parameter, the Fibonacci retracement of the fall what we got from 26,200 to 24,800, the 38.2% retracement comes at 25,250 zone, and that is where we got a rejection at the higher levels. So clearly, if you see, this is now has become a resistance zone. This was earlier the support in the uptrend. So clear cut, the support has turned into a resistance. We need to surpass this level decisively on a closing basis. Then we can head higher towards 25,500, which is the next resistance zone. So for me, currently, Nifty is stuck in a broad range where 24,800 is the support and 25,250 is a resistance on the upside. Till the time we don't breach on either side decisively, I don't expect any trending moves in the market. We might consolidate in this broad range. The part is that yesterday Bank Nifty was an underperformer post the RBI policy as well. Bank Nifty didn't perform at all. While Nifty has IT results which will be coming up, where the pharma index is also doing quite well. Bank Nifty is something which is a sign of worry. Bank Nifty, I will be only bullish above 51,700. Again, the fall what we got from 54,000 till the mark of almost 50,000 on the downside. 51,700 is a crucial resistance for the Bank Nifty. Once it surpasses that mark, then only aggressive long positions could be built in. Till the time, my approach on the Bank Nifty would be as a sell on rise. So whatever gap ups, what we'll be getting in today's trading session, utilize that to sell the Bank Nifty, keeping a stop loss of 51,700 and again looking for lower targets on the downside.
What would be the top picks this morning, Kunal?
So I think the first topic would be from the pharma space. As we mentioned, pharma looks very bullish on the chart perspective. Cipla has given a fresh breakout in yesterday's trading session. A consolidation range was there, and yesterday we broke out. So Cipla continues to be a buy for me at the current levels. On the higher end, I can see levels of 730, 780 that could be achieved in the short term. One can keep a stop loss of 1640 on the downside. So supply is something which is looking very strong on the chart perspective. Second is from the mid-cap space, EIH Hotel. That is looking very good. Yesterday trading session, if you must have observed, all the hotel stocks were trending, and that is where I think the momentum should continue if there is the bullish setup continuing in the market as well. So EIH Hotel, one can initiate a long. Falling trendline breakout has been given on the technical charts with a rise in volumes as well. Plus the momentum indicators are also indicating a buy signal at the current levels from the oversold territory. So EIH Hotel is a buy, keeping a stop loss of 390 and looking for targets of 450 on the upside.
Well, Kunal, the other one that we want to talk to you about is, I think one sector that stood out yesterday was real estate. Some may argue that it was because the provisional business data looks quite promising for the quarter, so it seems like there was some buying that was seen across the sector. Would you go long on any real estate name today?
Yes, definitely. Real estate is something as a space is looking ready for a pullback and the decent pullback what we can get. So here, DLF is looking interesting on the chart. In yesterday's trading session, the stock surpassed its 200 DMA plus its 100 DMA as well in yesterday's trading session. So there is a good breakout which has happened. The next resistance for the stock on the higher end is at around 880, which is the 20-day moving average for the DLF. So currently placed at 850, one can initiate a long positions, keeping a stop loss of 832 on the downside and looking for targets of 880 on the upside.
Nirav Ashar with us as well. Nirav, good morning. Thanks for joining in. And there's a pertinent point made, right, that some of the pockets are showing a lot of strength. Pharmaceuticals are case in point yesterday. Divi's up 8%, Cipla giving a breakout, a couple of others moving ahead. What's the thought here? I mean, are you guys constructive on this whole bucket? And if so, what stock stands out?
Yeah, good morning and thank you for having me on your show. Well, yes, pharma is looking quite good at the moment. And as I think we had discussed some time back, that pharmaceutical space generally works on a certain model. You have the first half of the calendar year where there is a procurement which is done. Typically, it's done from China, etc., all the other markets, raw material procurement. The second quarter where we have the production which picks up. The third quarter where we have the domestic demand which tends to be catch up, and the fourth quarter where the export demand tends to be quite good. So I think it's a revival of the sector, the pharmaceutical space. The demand seems to be making a comeback. The domestic markets are doing quite well. And there is a good export demand also in the offing. So I think stocks like Cipla or Lupin, Dr. Reddy's, Sun Pharma have done quite well. And the mid-cap stocks are also catching up. And to add to this, we also have the US Biosecure Act, which is there. That is also definitely going to boost the demand for a lot of mid-cap pharma companies. So we've seen companies like Piramal Pharma, etc. They're very positive about their outlook as far as the 2030 is concerned. We spoke about companies talking about doubling their revenues in the next 4 to 5 years. So the outlook seems to be quite positive on the pharma space.
Okay. So Laurus Labs in focus. We'll have to talk a bit about Divi's as well. Divi's was the standout of the day yesterday. Does it continue its upward move is something we'll have to see. We'll take a very quick break. We're coming back, of course, with pre-open and what your strategy for the day should be. But before we slip into that break, please take a look at this report. It's a farewell to a true titan of industry, Ratan Tata.
Ratan Tata, a doyen of corporate India, is no more. Born in 1937 to Naval and Sonu Tata, he was brought up by his formidable grandmother Navajbai Tata in a manor called Tata Palace in Mumbai. Ratan Tata was born into a family of great prestige. The lineage of Jamshedji Tata, the founder of the Tata Group and an integral part of India's history. Ratan Tata was schooled at Campion Cathedral and John Connon. He was driven to school in a Rolls Royce. Ratan Tata went to Cornell University and fell in love with America. He wanted to settle down in Los Angeles, but destiny had other plans for him. With his grandmother falling ill, he was compelled to return to India. A turbulent relationship with his father, Naval Tata, pushed Ratan Tata to apply for a job at IBM. His father was not happy. Naval Tata asked his son to tie up a resume and offered him a job with Tata Industries in 1962. He would go on to join Tisco, now called Tata Steel, in 1963. When Ratan Tata took over from his father as chairman of the Tata Group in 1991, India too was pivoting. License Raj was being revoked, the economy was being liberalized, and it was Ratan Tata's time in the sun. In the early 2000s, Ratan Tata had a string of high-profile acquisitions to his credit. Tetley, Chorus, Jaguar Land Rover and Daewoo took the Tata and Indian flag abroad. In 2008, he created history with the launch of the cheapest car in the world, the Nano, priced at 1 lakh rupees. He was also awarded the Padma Vibhushan that year. From telecom to software, manufacturing to aviation, FMCG to garments, the Tata Group has expanded across industries under Ratan Tata's watch. The conglomerate is worth over 30,000 crore rupees as of March this year. In 2008, when the Taj Hotel in Mumbai came under a terror attack, Ratan Tata showed great compassion and resilience during its aftermath. He stepped down as the chairman of Tata Sons in 2012 after 50 years and was appointed as chairman emeritus. A bitter fight with his appointed successor, Cyrus Mistry, over his handling of the group led to the ouster of Mistry. While propelling the group towards growth, he continued to indulge in his 3 loves, that is flying, fast cars and scuba diving. He was also a champion of startups and invested in successful companies like Lenskart, Urban Company, Bluestone and Ola Electric. Ratan Tata was well known to be very fond of his German shepherds Tito and Tango, and lived a simple life even as he created great wealth for fellow Indians.
We're back with India Market Open right here on NDTV Profit on a day when we mourn the passing away of Sri Ratan Tata and celebrate his life and achievements. Well, on news flow, Bernstein has downgraded India to an underweight rating. Mihika Johnson to tell us the rationale of that note as the pre-open rates start trickling in. Mihika, over to you.
Good morning. So the brokerage has always had a neutral stance, but the downgrade now comes because it finds Indian markets vulnerable in the near term due to high valuations. Now, they've stated that the pace of rating and earnings downgrades have been increasing, and only packs like utilities, tech, energy are showing some rise in ratings and earnings upgrade. Now, in terms of strategy for Indian markets, well, the preference is towards quality, low volatility large caps, and they suggest reducing your exposure towards high volatility stocks. Now, they suggest, and as well as the small and mid cap space. On the other hand, they've also maintained a tactical overweight on China because of the unexpected policy support that led to one of the strongest investor reactions with extreme inflows that could set Chinese markets for a short-term reversal. They've turned positive on the country post the policy announcement and still believe that China's risk-reward is skewed to an upside. And lastly, they expect the analyst sentiment towards the earnings to become more supportive despite the weak earnings of the companies. And they recommend adding growth along with high-volume Chinese stocks to the portfolio.
That's Bernstein, and they seem to have been concerned about India for a while now. They've also gone overweight China, at least for the interim. We will try and talk to Bernstein to get a better understanding of the thinking behind this change of stance on India. But let's stay with the markets as we gear up this morning. It's looking quiet in terms of pre-open trade. A start about 25,000 is what we have. Sustaining about those levels, though, is going to be what's important in today's day of trade. Earnings season kicks off with TCS reporting its numbers today. Along with that, there are a whole bunch of mid-sized companies as well that will be posting numbers. And if I'm not wrong, it's also Tata Elxsi that could be on reportage today. But Nirav, what is your expectation from the IT pack? From what I understand, we've already had quite a few downgrades of the sector. So the downside now post this earnings is rather limited. On the other side, the pool of big deals is also fairly limited. So not too much activity expected, but do you feel like it could be a good quarter for TCS and a long or, investing a little bit into TCS may not be such a bad idea ahead of earnings?
Yes, actually, we feel that the IT sector has shown a lot of resilience as a matter of fact in terms of valuations. If one were to look at TCS during the previous quarter, it was hovering around 3,900 levels. It's already come to 4,200 levels, and in the intermediate, it has made a high of around 4,500. If we look at the commentary of Tata Consultancy Services in the previous quarter, they have indicated that there has been a sequential growth in the revenues, and there has been a broad-based recovery. Another important factor which they have highlighted is that the domestic markets have shown very strong double-digit growth. So in the Indian markets have been performing quite well. So I think we expect the things to only improve in the current quarter. We expect the commentary to improve. And I think while the revenue growth should be in the range of 1.5% to 1.7%, I think the company is set to report an EPS of around 34 rupees. Full year, I think it should be close to around 134 rupees. So our target for the stock, if there is a meaningful re-rating, is close to 4,600.
So, well, 4,600. I wonder, Kunal, if IT is showing some spunk and can, assuming that nothing untoward happens in results, just if you leave the event out, are TCS charts, for example, looking strong?
See, Niraj, if you look at TCS, currently it has been consolidation in a broad range. The 20 DMA, that is the short-term moving average, is placed at 4,335. So till the time we don't surpass that mark decisively, I expect TCS to consolidate. However, on the lower end, the support for the stock is placed at 4,200. So if you look at the risk to reward ratio currently for TCS on the result day, it's favorable to be on the long side, where 4,200 could be kept as a stop loss on the downside. And first target will be that 4,335. If that is taken out and we sustain over that, then the next level could come as 4,430.
Kunal, that's the trade on TCS. I want to also quickly highlight and ask you if you have a word on Wipro. It's been the laggard in some sense for most part of this year as compared to the other tech majors. But the last few weeks, it's shown resilience. It's outperformed the tech pack in many ways. Do you feel like Wipro at these levels is looking like a good long trade?
Yes, definitely. At the current levels, I think Wipro is a start structure which is looking extremely bullish. There are high top, high bottom formations which is still intact. So the setup is quite bullish. And if it manages to hold the 518, which is the swing low of 518 levels, it can easily go towards 550, 555. Now, this is the first resistance for Wipro. If it is able to surpass that mark, then the next level directly comes at 578. So I think again at the current levels for Wipro, the risk to reward ratio is good. Plus the technical indicators are also indicating a buy signal. The uptrend is intact in Wipro. And I think from here, if there is some positive commentary or results by TCS, that will boost Wipro as well. So clear cut a good risk to reward ratio at the current levels.
Okay, so IT in focus this morning. I'm wondering if there is a play on metals, Kunal. Metals has been the underperformer. You're looking like you're set for a decent morning on the charts. Would you look at metals now and anything that you would pick from here?
Definitely, metal is something which is looking very attractive on the chart perspective. And over here, I think there is in the sector, if I talk about, there is more 4 to 5% upside that would come easily in the near term. From the space, my topic over here would be Hindalco. Hindalco, if you look at it, there was a broad consolidation which was there in Hindalco. 715, 710 was the mark, which it was not able to surpass. And after a broad consolidation, we saw a breakout in the stock with volumes. Yesterday, again, we witnessed that correction towards the support zone of 710, 715 mark, and then we rebounded again. So clear cut, it took a support at a 20-day moving average as well. And from here, the risk to reward ratio is extremely favorable going long on Hindalco. So Hindalco could be a good buy. 727 is currently where it is trading. Probably this range where you can accumulate between 720 and 727, keeping a stop loss of 705 on the downside. And again, looking for higher targets of 760 to 790 on the upside.
Nirav, what happened to consumption stocks in the last hour of trade yesterday? The top 4 out of 5 Nifty losers were from FMCG, ITC, Britannia, HUL. What suddenly changed? Did you hear about anything in the market yesterday for the reason for the collapse of these consumption names?
Well, as far as the consumption names are concerned, I think I could attribute it to plain profit booking. I think no other factors, because crude oil prices have been quite stable. And we've seen some pressure as far as the palm oil prices, etc. are concerned. So that could be one of the factors which could impact the FMCG sector. But rest, I think the commentary has been pretty decent. Whether it was Marico or Godrej Consumer Products, etc. And HUL also has been showing quite some.
Okay, Nirav, I'm just sorry. I'm going to just interrupt you there because we have Narayana Murthy on the phone line with us, and we're today celebrating Mr. Ratan Tata, an icon who has touched crores of Indian lives in so many ways, and the nation paying tribute. Mr. Murthy, I want to thank you first for joining us here on NDTV Profit. Thank you so much for taking out the time. And we're keen to hear your thoughts on how you see the life and contribution of Mr. Ratan Tata.
Well, Ratan Tata could be classified as king amongst the industrialists of India. I have had the privilege of sharing platform with him in India, in US, Australia, UK, etc. In every situation, I found him to be competent, to be humble, to be courteous, and of course, to be decent. What I found unique about him is whether he was talking to a young admirer or is a highly respected businessman. He showed the same level of attention in listening to them, same level of respect, and same level of courtesy. I think it's very sad that he passed away, because it's a huge loss to the country, and I pray that his soul will rest in peace. Thank you.
Mr. Murthy, sincere condolences to you, and I say this because you describe him as a friend, you also seek his blessings, so there is lots that, as the nation got from him, you got from him as well. Can you tell us about one or two key moments that are etched in your memory forever, which involved you and him?
Well, there were several occasions. For example, I think perhaps the most recent or the second recent one was when he and I were sitting next to each other at a dinner hosted by the Prime Minister for a visiting dignitary. I don't remember whether it was, Barack Obama or some other, dignitary. And I found it so refreshing that he was talking so much about his zero gravity ride experience in California that he had just completed a week or 10 days before that particular dinner. And he was full of enthusiasm. He was almost childlike. And I asked him what was the most difficult thing about that zero gravity ride experience. And he said, a lot of people came near me, and that was something I was somewhat uncomfortable. He didn't talk about the difficulty of zero gravity, none of that, because by nature, he was quite adventurous, as you know, as we all know. He loved flying. The second experience that I had was after he retired, I invited him to inaugurate the Akshay Patra kitchen, donated by my wife. Of course, as you know, my wife is first a Tata person, then anything else. And he readily accepted, and he spent two and a half days with us in Hubli. He had just then retired from Tata Sons, and his enthusiasm, his getting into details, his interaction with the local people, it was just extraordinary. We enjoyed it so much. The third incident that I can talk about is when I took my daughter Rakshita to meet him, because she had taken up a course on leadership in her degree. And then Akshita and he were supposed to spend about an hour. But he spent 3 hours with her. He answered every question of hers, with patience, with a lot of, detailing, affection, and, of course, with lucidity. So, and of course, the one that is memorable is when I gave him the Lifetime Achievement Award. I think it was 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I don't remember. I gave him the award, and then, keeping a tradition with my culture, I sought his blessings by touching his feet, and he was really moved. And I said, no, in our culture, you are elder to us, you are a respected elder to us, a wise elder to us, and there's a lot that we can learn from you. So I think I have had very positive, and there were, when there were some, issues of moral dilemma, many times I called him, and he always returned the calls pretty quickly and spent as much time as I wanted. So I think he was an extraordinary individual. It's a huge loss to the country, and I pray that his soul rests in peace. Thank you.
Right, Mr. Murthy, this, of course, is a very tough day and a sad day for the nation. But, at some stage, you and him were competitors in more ways than one. He at TCS and you at Infi. What were those days like? Do you look back and think about it differently? And also, how accessible was this man? We from the media believe he's done, 3 or 4 interviews in his whole lifetime. So we do believe he was shy. He was rather not accessible in more ways than one. Clearly, you don't seem to have that opinion.
I still remember, I was the chairman of Asia Business Council. There were a lot of well-known business people from various parts of China, parts of Asia, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, as well as from US and Europe. They were coming to Delhi, and I had arranged a meeting with the Prime Minister. And I requested Ratan to come and speak. He said, Murthy, I'll host a dinner for all the people, but will you spare me from speaking? I said, Ratan, whatever you say will be so important to all of us, all these business people. Why don't you do that? He came all the way for half an hour. He sat there, but he didn't speak. He asked, I think, somebody else to speak on his behalf. He was shy, but if you engaged him in a Q&A, he was a lot more comfortable. And, that's something that he was very wise, very kind, very affectionate, and he was a great patriot. I think for him, India came first. So his attempt at nano and many other things are clear indications of how patriotic he was. And I still remember I called him to inaugurate our management council room. At that time, probably the most advanced in Asia in terms of technology and all of that. So he said, no, TCS is your competitor. Why are you inviting me? I said, no, this is named after Jamsetji Tata. Jamsetji Tata transcends all business issues. He was first a great Indian and then anything else. So therefore, we are honored to name it after Jamsetji Tata. And then he said, no, but why are you inviting me? I said, look, we all consider you to be in the same class as Jamsetji Tata in terms of respect, in terms of wisdom, in terms of your concern for India, in terms of your patriotism. Therefore, we'll be honored if you come. He said, no, but I will not speak long. I said, don't worry, Ratan, just speak for, maybe 1 or 2 minutes. So I went. He came, it was he was very kind, very, very kind.
Mr. Murthy, it's just so emotional listening to you, and I really want to thank you for taking out the time. I hope you can give us a little more time later in the day for a more detailed conversation on your experience with Mr. Ratan Tata. These are stories that must be told. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. We really
thank you very much. Wonderful. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. So Narayan Murthy there, this just, the story is coming in, and Samina, a great point that you made, that they were rivals at one point, right? But they didn't really look at it that way. We have to get back to the markets, and the opening has not been half bad, I would say, above the 25,000 mark on the Nifty. You are seeing an upside coming in. Pressures though holding out. And L&T working today, BPCL, Adani Ports, NTPC, a lot of your old economy stocks working. IT is not really buzzing. IT languishing to some extent. Bank Nifty looking decent though in relative terms this morning. Just want to get a quick word from Kunal on, what is the top stock that you have spotted in the first few minutes of opening this morning, Kunal? You can see the crude, the crude impact stocks doing well. Oil India, HPCL doing fairly well this morning. So is BPCL.
I think overall, if you look, yes, there is buying in the mid cap and the small cap space as well. Market has been consolidating. So it is a stock specific approach which one should take over here. The stock which has highlighted in today's trading session for me in this case is NCC. NCC, if you can look in on the technical chart, it has given a fresh breakout. It has given a breakout about 20-day moving average. The last 4 to 5 days high, which were there in NTPC, on NCC has been surpassed decisively with volumes. So I think this is where the stock is likely to gain some momentum. Keep a stop loss of 299 on the downside, and one can look for immediate targets of 323 and second target 331 on the upside.
Just a quick check of how the rest of the market is doing this morning. The Nifty is trading okay. It's not showing the sort of excitement that it was when the markets, just before market opened. The implied Nifty was indicating to a much better start. Giving up, we are coming off at every sort of uptick in terms of trade. This morning is no different. The breadth of the market also is nothing great or nothing much to talk about. We'll quickly take a check of how the Nifty is trading in terms of the Nifty 50 counters. You've got L&T, NTPC, OMCs aren't doing too badly. Some of your auto stocks are holding up. The likes of JSW Steel that sold off sharply yesterday are finding a bit of a base for today's trade. On the sell side, Adani Enterprise is down nearly 2%. Tata Motors is looking weak, which is also weak yesterday. Nestle continues to sell off, and ICICI Bank also not finding any relief in early trade. On the broader markets, you've got a whole bunch of stocks that are moving, and RCF is up 5%. PNC Infratech, I highlighted the stock ahead of the market open because it bagged a significant order, and it is your top gainer on the Nifty 500 this morning with an up move of 5.5% on pretty decent volumes as well. You've also got Tata Chemicals is doing okay, 4% higher there. So fertilizers as a pack is having a relatively positive morning. You've also got stocks like CDSL 361 that are trading with a small bias on the upside. On the sell side, the list has to be topped by Star Health, down 2.5%. You've got Home First Finance, Rights, Aptus, Natco Pharma. So Pharma also looking fairly subdued in early trade. Broader markets performing largely in line with the benchmark is what we have. Kunal, any trade that you've spotted post-market opening? It's not looking as good as we'd have anticipated, at least with the early indications on implied Nifty. It's subdued. We got a gap up, but we're getting sold again.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned at the start of the show, that we are just trading in a big consolidation phase. So market is likely to consolidate, but there will be stock-specific approach which one should focus on. So over here at the start of the show, what we had talked about the oil and gas space. That is something which is looking attractive to me at the current levels. From there, Petronet is something which is looking very good on the technical charts. After a good correction, what we have seen from the higher end, the stock is now rebounding sharply and showing some strength. So one can initiate a buy over here at Petronet, keeping a stop loss of 343 on the downside and looking for targets of 370 to 392 on the upside.
Nirav, what about you? What are you attributing this weakness to? I mean, there's a general sense that, any sort of, for investors, any sort of weakness is being used as a buying opportunity. There are NFOs getting launched pretty much every other day, and are getting lapped up. So the supply and the response to some of these NFOs has been phenomenal. Then why do you think the markets are not being able to stabilize at these levels? What is the big sort of negative right now? Because nothing really has changed dramatically over the last 5 days.
Yeah, so I agree with you. The domestic cues have been quite positive, but I think it is the global factors which are playing spoilsport as far as the markets are concerned. We are seeing heavyweights like Reliance Industries and ICICI Bank, HDFC Bank being under pressure consistently, and they pull down the markets every time when the markets have tried to move up. But having said that, there are pockets of strength in the market. I think what we should mention particularly is the power sector. If you see the power sector, power generation, power transmission and distribution companies, they've been doing exceptionally well in the last few days of trading. We've seen brokerage upgrades for power generation companies like JSW Energy, Tata Power. Yesterday, we've seen good moves in Torrent Power. We've seen transmission and distribution companies, especially power transformer makers like Transformers Rectifiers, which has reported a stellar set of numbers. After this, we've seen good movement in GE T&D, stocks like Hitachi Energy, Indotech Transformers. All these stocks have rallied in trade. Voltan Transformers too has done quite well in trade. And we have the smaller T&D companies like Jyoti Structures, Skipper, which have done exceptionally well in trade. So I think this space definitely warrants attention at this point of time.
Just before we thank you, Nirav, can we pull up the stock price of Transformers and Rectifiers or TRIL? Just for a moment, can we just pull that stock price up? Because the last 2 days, the stock was locked on an upper circuit. Let's just get the stock first up. And then I want to ask Nirav Asher about the same, because it's an expensive stock, but it's 3 upper circuits after the results have come out. Nirav Asher, do you track Transformers and Rectifiers?
This stock from 40 levels, from 40 rupees, and today it is at near 700 levels. So we've been very optimistic about the prospects of this company, very good management, and they have given a very strong guidance of achieving $1 billion revenue in the next 3 years. The order book, the unexecuted order book at this point of time is 3,500 crores. And the margins have been improving drastically. If you look at the profitability, it's around 67 crores for the first half of this year as compared to a loss in the previous year. So I think the going seems to be quite good, and they have planned to be a fully integrated company in the near future. So the prospects look quite appealing, despite the fact that the valuations are expensive.
No, please. No, the point is, I think I like that point that he's making, that companies which are showing growth are getting rewarded, Samina, and that is what's probably happening with Trill as well. I was just wondering if Kunal has some view here before we get into management, because Kunal, 3 days of an upper circuit, the stock has done very well. Can charts suggest something like this on a stock?
Yeah, I think definitely. If you look at the chart perspective, in the last at least 1.5 months, the stock at 800 had come down to almost 600 mark. And if you look at this 800 to 600, it looks like almost a 20% decline on the downside. But if you look on the chart on a holistic perspective, this is just a broad consolidation which was happening on the longer term chart. And finally, this consolidation where we had been seeing buying from the lower levels in 650, 660 zone. In fact, the momentum indicator, the RSI has also given a positive crossover. So clear cut, there was signs visible on the chart perspective. 2 days back, there was a buy signal which was there on the chart perspective, and post that we have seen the rally in the stock.
Well, gentlemen, both of you, thanks so much for joining in. And the reason we kind of deliberated on TRIL for a bit, because the management is, in fact, the think tank for TRIL is in our studios. Mr. Jitendra Mamtora, Chairman of Transformers and Rectifiers, and Chanchal S.S. Rajora, CFO and advisor to the board, are with us in our studios. Gentlemen, both of you, thank you so much for taking the time out and speaking to us.
Thank you.
Mr. Mamtora, one of the notes says that TRIL beat our Q2 estimates by a mile. Now, you're making it a habit, Mr. Mamtora. I would love to understand from you what went into Q2 or the first half, and how does this augur for the company in the quarters to come?
This has been long awaited. If you just see the transformer industry, it has gone through a good time, bad time. We had very good time from 2002 to 2007. We had EBITDA margins of something like 19-20%. 2008-9 onwards, it started deteriorating because of the competition, because of the new entrants into the business who had no knowledge of the business. And they really spoiled the whole market. But ultimately what happened was they vanished. You cannot survive if your quality is no good, if you have no passion for the business. And this business, if you say, the business in which we are, mainly I'm talking about extra high voltage transformers, the special duty transformers like transformers for the arc furnaces, for submerged arc furnaces, for the large rectifiers which are used for metal refining and producing of some chemicals like chlorine, etc. So there are no players who compete with us in those special duty transformers. We survived in those bad time when the raw material content was 80%. Gross margin were 12% only. We survived because of these special duty transformers, and we have taken it forward. And my passion was that I want to become a major player in the special duty transformers, which was ruled by 4 of the European companies, and I wanted to be one of them. These 4 companies were having a market share of 70% of the world, and we wanted to be one of them. We worked very hard. We recruited a person from Italy, a white face, because white face makes a difference at times. And we hired him. He was a technical director in one of the companies in Italy, and he moved to India with his family. The youngest child that time he had was 2-year-old.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
is he still working with you?
So he stayed there with us for 5 years, and after 5 years, his wife said that now it is too much. The children are growing. They started speaking
fluent
Hindi and Gujarati. Also, they were going to the schools, but ultimately he left, and then he didn't help so much as I thought he will. But nevertheless, we were introduced to that market. And then the opportunity started coming. I'll narrate one incident.
Sorry, the opportunity started coming, sir. You're saying in the last 3-4 years, maybe?
No, long time, about 7-8 years back.
Okay.
We got an opportunity. A factory in Russia, a steel making company, their transformer failed. So they were looking for someone who can replace the transformer very fast. And then he approached one of their agents who was an Indian. He approached Indian company, that was BHEL. BHEL suggested our name.
Wow.
Bharat Heavy Electrical suggesting our name was a credit to
itself. Yeah.
And then,
sir, I will just request you to pause for just a moment, because we just need to mark the fact that one of the tallest leaders have passed away. This is a guard of honor in the honor of Sri Ratan Tata. And we'll keep on during the course of the day today, bring you these visuals as well. It's a sad day, Samina.
It's a tough morning. Yeah, but I think we started the day off very sad, but I think now I've got a smile on my face because everyone remembers him so fondly. And that's what you leave behind, right? I mean, life is only lived if it has a legacy behind. So, but sir, you want to continue with telling us the legacy you're creating at Transformers.
Yeah, so, I sent that Italian guy to Russia.
You sent the Italian to Russia, I like that.
Because it was urgent.
Yes.
And they were in so much of urgency that the day he landed, they placed the order.
This is BHEL had recommended your name.
Yeah, they recommended our name. And the company, on the very same moment, they signed the order. They paid the advance,
and
that was the beginning, and that was a large transformer, the largest which India had made, even today.
Right.
So that was the beginning of our journey.
Right.
And then we went on getting the inquiries from the other steel makers. We got the opportunity from Areva for supplying the transformer to Sterlite plant in Tuticorin for the rectifier. That was again a large transformer.
Right.
And we were honored to get the order from them.
Right.
But the condition was that our design will be
as what they like.
Yeah, they will be reviewed by their experts.
Right, sir.
And they suggested something. It was just a single page, A4 page, design comments, and that has again changed my design. Yeah.
Right, so it's actually changed the fortunes of your company in a big way. And I think, like we said, the last few quarters have been phenomenal. I mean, the growth is just stupendous, to say the least. Chanchal, why don't you come in and tell us, revenues are up 80%, EBITDA is up 255%, margins have more than doubled in this quarter versus last year. Is this sort of growth sustainable? A, and B, what has been the key drivers? I know over the last few weeks, we've been hearing about your big order wins, Power Grid being one of them.
Yes.
But that, of course, will only reflect in the next quarter. What's working for you, and is this sort of growth sustainable, most importantly, for the rest of the year?
Look, the thing is this last 3 quarters, not last 3 quarters, basically the journey has begun for us for almost a year and a half back. Right. What we have basically done in last year and a half is that we have set our processes in place. We have basically bring so many changes into the organization at the operational level, which has helped us to increase our operational efficiency. And that operational efficiency has started reflecting in our profitability as well as in revenue. This is just a beginning, actually. This is just a beginning for us, and we have to go a mile on that, right? So the margins basically, as just chairman also says, that in old good days we have reached up to 19-20% margin.
So there's more room on the upside to go for margins.
So that is what we are targeting now in next 2 years.
When is that? Okay, so 2 years later, fair to assume that 15% could go up to 19, 20.
And more than that, actually, I am a man of finance, and my target is on the bottom line. I am more looking on the PAT. So I am looking on that where I can increase my PAT to beyond 10% levels. So that is my target, because that's the money which is coming into my system, and I'll be using it for the revenue growth purpose.
No, sorry, I have a question to both of you, and maybe Mr. Mamtora can speak about the color of the business, but just the numbers first, Chanchal. You did 1,300 crores in FY24.
Right.
You've given a guidance of 2,000 crores for FY25 and more, but 1,300 crores with 10% EBITDA margin is materially different from maybe 2,500 crores or what have you in FY26 with what? 18-20% EBITDA margin.
Yes.
So you think that's a possibility? You've given 2,000 crores for FY25. What about FY26? I mean, is there a broad number in mind, and would EBITDA numbers be about 18-20% then?
FY26, FY25, 26 we are targeting beyond 3,000 crore.
3,000 crores in FY26.
Yes, that's right. And we have the vicinity of that.
And that would be accompanied with what margins? Sorry?
Margins will be also in that levels, around 17% we are targeting, and it will be there. We have the vicinity, my order book says, my inquiry says, right? And the kind of the product mix we have, actually in this country, nobody has got that product mix, and that is helping us to grow our margins. That's the biggest thing and biggest USP what we have. In the lean period, what Sir has developed the products, they are basically now paying us back.
So would it be fair for us to assume you are not a price taker in your industry, and hence your margins are looking as good as they do, because clearly you don't have any captive raw materials or any of that leads to a uptick on margins, right?
Yeah, that's right. You know, ultimately this industry right now, the first time the industry is demand is so huge, right? And that is helping us to little bit increase our margins.
What capacity are you at right now?
As I was just talking to Harsh also, the capacity is a myth in our company, basically, in our industry, right? If I make higher rating transformers in higher numbers, and with repeated design, my capacity will increase automatically. Right now, we assume that we are having almost 40,000 MVA capacity. But if I make a 500 MVA transformer of 8 numbers or 10 numbers in a month, it will go to 50,000, and it will reach up to, this is the one plant only. So that's the thing. So we as an engineering standard, we see right now we are at the 40,000 MVA. We are coming up with the capacity expansion of 15,000 MVA in next 4-5 months time. So we will be, by end of this year, we should be at 60 to 65,000 MVA capacity levels.
Quite interesting.
So that will be good enough to take us to the 4,000 or 4,500 numbers in next 2 years' time.
Lovely. Would love to understand from Mr. Mamtora about the color and why this would happen. But just viewers, keep on remember that we'll keep on bringing you visuals of what's happening in Mumbai, and it's a sad day, but it's also a day of celebrating the life of Shri Ratan Tata. So keep that in mind. But Mr. Mamtora, he's talking about some really strong numbers as well. You've spoken about how in the past the industry went through tough times as well. Do you get a feeling, sir, that because of all the investments in power, so on and so forth, and the change in the sector and transformers as well, do you reckon that this cycle or this upcycle is here to stay for a few years? Why or why not?
At least for a decade.
At least for a decade?
Yeah.
Why do you say that, sir?
Because, see, we are shifting towards electrical vehicles. We are shifting towards green energy, which means solar and wind is going to play a major role, where you don't spend anything on the fuel. There is no fuel required, it just comes free. Only thing is that, if you look at the past, a solar plant used to cost something like 18 crores per megawatt. Now it went down as low as 2 crores.
Now it's about 5.
Now it is about 2.5.
2.5, okay.
Yeah, 2.5, 2.6. So with this, what happens is you need 5 times the capacity. Like if you put up a thermal plant, if it works at 100% efficiency, it gives you 100%. A solar plant, if you put up 100 megawatt, it will, on an average, it will give you 15 to 16 megawatt only, because it depends on the sun, the rays which it gets, and wind also like that. About 5 to 6 times you have to make the investment, but still it is worth. Today, a thermal plant will cost you something like 8 to 9 crores. This will cost you equivalent plant if you want to put. It will cost you something like 10 to 12 crores, but there is no fuel required. So it just comes free.
Right, sir.
Right. And moreover, worldwide, like in America, if you see, today the waiting time or the lead time is more than 3 years. So people are talking about, they are floating the tenders for the requirement of 2029. 2029, I'm telling you. So 5 years.
So what's the ambition in your mind now?
See,
how large can TRIL become in the course of this decade?
We are...
Let's not get into numbers. I'm just trying to think.
I'm talking about that. The main thing will be how we go for the backward integration. Because backward integration is very, very essential for an industry like us, where, the suppliers... if you look at the transformer business, transformer manufacturers takes the maximum hit. They gives the bank guarantee, which varies from 3 years to 5 years, which ultimately lead to around 8 years of bank guarantee, starting from contract bank guarantee and then this and that. So it's about 8 years. Our suppliers, they don't give any bank guarantee. They don't have any obligation to us. They supply the material and they forget it. Whether the material is good or bad, and we have to rely on them. So I want to focus also on those lines, and for that I visited China about 2 weeks back, and I was there for 6 days. I visited 6 cities in 6 days. I talked to them, and what we thought was that instead of experimenting with the materials, the backward integration.
Mr. Mamtora, I'm so sorry, but we'll have to cut across yet again to the final moments.
No, it's a very, very good day in terms of that.
Sorry. We've just cut across with audio, so we won't be able to talk about it. But I'm sorry.
राजू राजू वो यहाँ पर आपको देखने के लिए मिलेगी वो जाएगा जहाँ पर जाएगा तमाम बड़े नेता राष्ट्रीय स्तर पे और राष्ट्रीय स्तर से यहाँ पर आएंगे और दर्शन के लिए और दोपहर की वक्त होगा जब वर्ल्ड की
Okay, well, of course, this is just that such a day, and Mr. Mamtora, I don't know whether you had a chance to interact with the great man, but you would have surely seen. I mean, because you've had your business at the times that he's built out the Tata empire too. Any thoughts on the greatness of Sri Ratan Tata?
See, Ratan Tata. Before Ratan Tata, I will go to JRD Tata. When they were building Howrah Bridge. This is what I've heard. Because I've never interacted with them or he thought of that what is going to be the requirement for making a Howrah Bridge. So he started with making the rivets because there are no welding, in Howrah Bridge there are no welding, it is just rivets. So he was ready with all the rivets which were going to be required for making Howrah Bridge. See, that was the thought process, forward thinking. You can't see people doing that, right? So
what about Ratan Tata, sir?
Ratan Tata is, as I said, he's a very silent player. He did so many things. He came out with, the tussle with the other partner, Tata Sons. And he's slowly, I mean, without making any noise, he removed him from the main scene. So he's such a great man. Everybody talks about him. His passion for the work, his passion for selecting the kind of a business which he wants to do. Where, like if you talk about any industrialist in India, whether it is Bajaj, earlier, it was Bajaj, Birla, Ratan Tata. They were the three major players. And it was a time for, kind of a monopoly business. Like cars, if you see, it is Birla, Ambassador, and then Fiat and all that. But he ventured into the businesses which will take him to a different level. Ambanis and Adanis, they have come. And their passion for business is great. But he was different.
I think Italy was a visionary.
Yeah, he was a visionary.
Look ahead, which none of us, or most of us, could not.
He was visionary.
Yeah, just like you are in your business as well, sir.
No, I'm a passionate. I'm passionate about
and I think,
my business.
all these EQ factors that I think Jitendraji talked about is so important, right? Very rarely do we talk about what really helps a business succeed in today's day and age. Numbers, sure, but you also need the passion, the drive, and just wanting to succeed. Chanchal, Jitendraji referred to the fact that backward integration is one thing that you all want to focus on. We've talked about how the company is on accelerated mode to achieve the kind of growth you're setting out for yourself. 20% margin is also not impossible for you. Any plans to go out and acquire companies, sort of work on the backward integration of the business to reach the next level?
No, we are already working on that basically. One of exercise what we have done is we already signed a term sheet for taking a substantial interest basically in a CRGO processing unit, right? And this transaction is going to be closed in next couple of weeks time. So with that we will be 100% in-house on the CRGO processing. And for the raw material side of the CRGO, we already signed the agreements with the bills to supply the electrical steels to us on next 2 to 3 years time. So CRGO is a product which is almost 35% of our raw material, which is very, very important project. So we have done that exercise. We are also going into heavily on the backward integration on the size of transformer tank manufacturing, which is the fabrication, which is the biggest bottleneck at this moment in this industry. So these are the activities we have done it, and we are also looking for some inorganic acquisition side. We are on pretty advanced stages on that. So the idea, the entire idea is that to basically make ourselves completely independent on the component side, right? And raw material side, we are already tying up with the raw players who are into the long into the system. So the thing is that the next 1 year down the line, we should have all the backward integration components in place, in-house. Okay. And that's the way. And in fact, our managing director is actually working on that direction completely to take those lines. And with the kind of guidance what we are getting from the chairman and the MD, we are sure that the legacy what Mr. Tata has created for the industry, that TRIL also will create in this space, sir.
Okay, Mr. Mumtora, 60 seconds please before we wrap up. Any final words, what people should watch out for over the decade, because you mentioned it's a decadal thing.
See, as I said, 20% EBIT margin is not new to the industry.
And you will get it.
We will get it. And moreover, if we talk about 20% margin 20 years back and 20% EBIT margin today, raw material prices have jumped to almost double during this time. So look about the absolute figures, bottom line of absolute figures.
And the pricing power probably that exists.
So 20% there and 20% here
is a different
is a different, totally a different ball game.
Lovely.
Right? So this is what we are looking at.
We wish you
luck. And congratulations, been a phenomenal quarter. We'll pull up the stock for you as well. It's hit upper circuit, you'd be happy to know, over the last few days. The street is excited about business for you. And another morning of upper circuit. So that's the chart on the screen. 741 on transformers. At the get-go, the counter has hit upper circuit for the third straight day. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And have a good, I believe you've come down from Gujarat, so have a good travel back. We'll speak to you soon. Well, that's the management of transformers and rectifiers. It is a hidden gem, and the stock has been hitting upper circuit for the last few days. Phenomenal quarter for the company behind them. Talking about earnings, what lies ahead this morning for us is the earnings reportage from Tata TCS. Moshe Khatri, MD, Equity Research, IT Services and Payments, Wedbush Securities, joins us. Moshe, good evening, good morning from my end. I'm really sorry to have kept you waiting, but it's... we've lost an icon. The country has lost an icon. In fact, Ratan Tata, the founder of the Tata Group, the legacy of the Tata Group, has left the country, has passed away, and that hence the chaos about coming to you. But Moshe, very quickly, earnings of TCS expected later on in the day. Let's start with TCS and then broaden the conversation to what you're expecting from the sector as whole.
Yeah, tough day for the nation in general because of this loss. So I'll start with that. I would say in general, this earnings season is going to be a bit mixed. TCS did message to the street that they're going to have some margin, unusual margin trends during the quarter because of one specific contract. In general, I would say about this earnings season is that you have to look at two different buckets. The buckets that focuses on cost takeout deals and the one that focuses on discretionary projects. The cost takeout side remains pretty strong. The discretionary piece, I think, is stable, but maybe somewhat doing a bit better because of the rate cuts from a few weeks ago. So you will definitely see a discrepancy because between some of the companies that are focusing on the cost takeout part of the business. So, the tier one offshore players should be in a pretty decent shape. Accenture obviously had better than expected numbers. The guidance for fiscal 25 was better than expected as well. So I think the street sentiment is relatively positive about the space. But then having said all that, there's the near term and there's the long term that you have to focus on if you're investing in the space. Beyond this earnings season, you have to consider the potential outcome of the U.S. elections. And that's a big deal because you have one party that's talking about raising the corporate tax rate if they do get elected, and the other party is not. Any sort of increase in taxes will not bode well for discretionary spending for calendar 25. So you have to focus on that as well. And I think that, when we talk to many companies in the space, they are focusing on early November and the outcome of the U.S. elections, because that will determine how calendar 25 is going to look like.
Yeah. Thanks for that. That was pretty consolidative in that sense. But let's break this down, right? Of course, this comes in on the heels of the rate cut that we've seen, and there should be an impact. Point completely taken. But do you believe that demand has turned for the good across the industry, A? And B, there is only a limited pools of big deals that are available, right? There'll be few who'll win, there'll be most who won't. Is that something you're concerned about? And who do you think is going to take the big bucks this time around?
So, as I said, the tier one offshore players that are focusing on the cost takeout deals should be in a pretty decent shape. Remember, these are deals that we started to see coming through the pipeline in the past, 18 to 24 months. They haven't really converted until June of this year. So this is just the beginning of that conversion. So all these companies should be in pretty decent shape to show top line growth and okay margins. The real question is going to be more about the discretionary stuff. And in that context, I'm talking more about, the likes of EPAM and ThoughtWorks and Endava. These are companies that trade in the States. They're focused mostly on digital. These are the small to mid-cap names in our space. And they'll probably continue to have some potential headwinds or kind of flattish numbers until we get a better feel on where discretionary spending is going to be. So, as I said, two separate buckets. The one that focuses on cost takeout deals should be in decent shape. The one that focuses predominantly on discretionary work will still be dependent on the environment. Rate cuts, who wins the elections, the budget cycle for calendar 25 that may be pushed out just because it has been pushed out for the past few years. So there's a lot of different factors that could impact the next few quarters, if you will.
Moshe, just one quick question. Would you reckon that IT at large could start, because the market discounts 6 months out, do you reckon that post-November outcomes would start getting baked into the minds of the investors, if not in the commentary of the companies?
They have to. And again, your typical investor understands the impact of taxes on discretionary spending. Any sort of uncertainty will impact discretionary spending and will impact visibility and will impact the budget cycle. You've had 2 consecutive years with budgets being delayed. That means that you had a slower than usual start for the year, back end loaded year, not too much visibility. So I think, we're focusing on earnings, that's fine, but you have to focus on what happens early November, because again, as you said, you have to discount what happens 6 months from now. So there's a lot to take here. It could be pretty volatile, I would say that.
Moshe, we'll leave it at that. Thanks so much for taking the time out and being with us today. And thanks for your patience waiting by while we were finishing the previous conversation. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks.
Right. That's the view on IT. Wrap it up on this leg of India Market Open. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's Talking Point. I'm your host, Niraj Shah. Our guest today is Pranjul Bhandari, Chief India and Indonesia Economist at HSBC. Pranjul, thanks so much for taking the time out and being with us. Really good talking to you as always. We'll, of course, we will cut in at different points in time to what's happening in Mumbai following the sad demise of Sri Ratan Tata. So that will be a part of Talking Point today as well, viewers. But Pranjul, good having you. Thank you for joining in. I'd love to understand from you, Pranjul, how do you see what's happening on the economic growth front as well as on the policy action front? So let's start with the policy because that is front and center, considering that the MPC just concluded yesterday. What did you make of the decision? I take it that you believe that the MPC set the stage for rate cuts in the next two meetings?
Yes, absolutely. So the meeting was in line with what we had expected. We were expecting, an easing of stance from hawkish to neutral, but not a rate cut yet. And the reason we were expecting an easing of stance was because there have been a lot of developments since the last policy meeting. We've seen a lot of the high frequency growth indicators soften a little bit on the margin, from PMI to tax collection, cement production, passenger vehicle sales. That's on the growth front. On inflation, we've got more convincing data that temperatures have normalized, reservoirs have filled up, and perhaps not immediately, but by March 2025, maybe we'll be fairly close to the 4% inflation target. So given these two important developments, we were expecting an easing of stance. And in a way, you can also argue it was long due. But we were still not expecting a rate cut because the geopolitical environment still remains fairly uncertain. We have the US elections coming up in a month. We don't know where oil prices will finally stabilize even now. And our sense was that, it's a good idea to wait and also to go in steps, sequence it out. First step, ease your stance, and second step, a rate cut. So this happened as per our expectations, and now we expect a rate cut in December and another one in February.
Okay, Pranjul, let me wrap that piece before I talk about anything else. What are the challenges to these assumptions, or do you reckon that, considering how things are, and from whatever little crystal ball gazing that is possible for anybody to do, you think these are given?
Look, I think so. And I think what gives me confidence right now is the fact that we have a $7 billion FX reserves. So even if the external environment is fairly volatile, for example, say if we go back to a period of sustained dollar strength, which impacts our currency, our sense is that we have enough FX reserves to see us through those situations at this point of time. And monetary policy making from here on will mostly be determined by domestic considerations and not as much global, because we've built up some amount of FX reserves to help with that. And then when you look at the domestic part, you see that the drivers of inflation look better and better poised for disinflation right now than they were even a couple of months ago, with much better food price outlook because of reservoirs and temperatures normalizing. And on the margin, we are seeing some changes in growth happening. Look, I'm not going to call it a marked slowdown. I think more than anything, it's normalization in some sectors like urban demand and perhaps rotation from urban to rural. But what happens in the process is that it doesn't happen seamlessly. And I think we are stuck in this point right now where urban demand has softened a little bit on the margin. It's normalized, but rural hasn't yet taken off. It takes time for rural to take off. Only when farmers go to the market and sell their kharif produce, they get incomes from that, they spend it, then we'll start seeing the rural demand pick up a little bit. And I suppose that will be more like November, December. So right now we are in a no man's land. Urban has softened, rural has still not picked up. So to handhold in these kind of situations, I think, a rate cut or two may not be a bad idea.
Got it. Okay. Pranjul, would the rate cut be the necessary condition, even if not the sufficient one, for growth to get a leg up? Because I think if kind of you squeezed in between, the Reserve Bank seemed a lot more confident than maybe you are or some others are about what the growth numbers could look like in the quarters to come. But what's your own sense?
Well, look, to be very honest, I'll tell you, a lot of people after the policy found the policy fairly hawkish because the RBI spoke more about upside risks on inflation than it spoke about downside risks on growth. But to be very honest, I don't think RBI had an option. For the last several quarters, they've been talking a lot about upside risks on inflation and very strong growth, and they could not completely do a U-turn. They could not suddenly start saying that growth is very weak, and just a month ago, the governor was saying in speeches that growth is fairly strong. So look, one is that, right? You don't make such sharp U-turns, particularly if you're the central bank of an economy. And second, as I said, I think that the RBI is also waiting and watching. I think we are pivoting from urban to rural, and the pivot sometimes doesn't happen very smoothly. There are a few weeks or months in the middle where things don't look that great, and I think we're sort of in that area, at this point of time. Okay.
But what could surprise you on the growth, Pranjul? I mean, like I said, I believe you are. Let's put it this way: you are a bit more skeptical than the Reserve Bank of India, or the central bank is a lot more optimistic than you or consensus. So what can surprise you on the growth? Would it have to be a global driven factors which could lead to growth upsides from your estimates, or could it be something else?
Yeah. So look, we have our growth forecast at close to 7%, and which is a little lower than RBI, which is at 7.2. I would say that if there are any risks, I think there are slight risks to the downside. And if I were to give a range, I would think growth is closer to your 6.8 to 7% range. And again, the reason for that is that, we are expecting a smooth transition from urban to rural, and sometimes it may not be smooth. I think, that is one area that we have to be careful about. Of course, then there are global considerations, what really happens with global demand, what happens with global liquidity, what happens with commodity prices. I think all of this will also weigh in. So these are some of the things we need to be focused on in the short run. But then there are also a lot of medium-term considerations. For example, is India fully seizing the day on the global opportunities that it has been presented with? For instance, a lot of industries rejigging their supply chains and moving out of a few countries and trying to go to some other countries. Are we being able to attract the kind of FDI that we need to make this, to sort of benefit from this whole China plus one theme? I think these are the considerations that will really impact medium-term growth and medium-term inflation. Here, the RBI cannot do very much. I think a lot of it will depend on government policy. But I think what RBI can do with a few shallow rate cuts here and there is handhold while important transitions are happening.
Got it. Would some people argue that liquidity has been a constraint? The RBI has done a little bit. They spoke about it. The governor spoke about it as well. But even if there is no rate action, and until we see a rate action, if there is meaningful stuff done on easing liquidity, even bankers are happy with it because it gives them a chance to kind of settle down with rates too. But if liquidity measures are adequate, Pranjul, do you think that is also something that could help kick up capex and thereby growth?
I think liquidity sort of matters, but it matters on the margin. And to be very honest, I think RBI has also loosened liquidity in a big way. I agree that for a few months, especially at the beginning of the year, liquidity was very tight. There were many reasons for it. One was that the government in its new just-in-time accounting was not spending very smoothly. It had large amounts of tax money locked up at its deposit with the RBI, which was creating a banking sector liquidity deficit. So I agree that was happening. Again, then at the same time, global markets were uncertain. The dollar was very strong, and the RBI was happy to run a policy which is tighter rates on the short end. So I can imagine liquidity being an issue a couple of months ago. But now all of that has changed in a major way. RBI has been buying a lot of FX, infusing rupee liquidity. Base money growth has risen from 4% to 8%. The government has also started spending a lot. And my sense is that, yes, liquidity has eased quite a lot, and that should give a lot of comfort, to businesses and to banks. And my best indicator for that is short-end rates. Today, a lot of the short-end money market rates are trending about 25 basis points below the repo rate. So my sense is that was the first step in which the RBI signaled looser monetary policy, and we've already done that. Of course, the challenge is, and the task is, to hold on to this slightly loose liquidity. And I see no doubt why it shouldn't, because if you look at core liquidity right now, which is the money which is there in the markets, plus the unspent money that the government has in its account with the RBI, that's actually very high. It's 4 to 5 trillion rupees. And as the government spends more, my sense is that, liquidity will continue to remain flush.
Okay, Pranjal, you mentioned an interesting point about how the Reserve Bank of India or the MPC or the Governor spoke or maybe sounded a bit more hawkish than other people may have anticipated, but they didn't have a choice. I thought there was also a fair degree of commentary on the nature of growth or growth pursuit of some of the non-banking financial institutions per se individually, as well as maybe did I sense discomfort around smaller ticket loans, micro loans, etc. Did you get a sense of that? And we've seen regulators now trying to curb some of those activities on the NBFC side, from the SEBI side, on the brokerage side as well. Do you think we continue to see more of those actions?
Yeah, so look, sort of let me take a step back. And while the central bank thinks about inflation and growth, at the same time, it's the custodian for financial stability as well. And that is something which the central bank has been taking very seriously. And in every policy meeting, they've been highlighting something or the other. I think it started a couple of months ago when they were worried that unsecured loan growth was very strong. They had increased risk weights, and that brought down growth in that area. After that, it has spoken about, equity markets, the possibility that they are, overvalued at this point of time. At some point, there was indirect hint of the yield curve being extremely flat. So generally, the fact that financial conditions have been extremely easy in India at this point of time is something that the RBI has been bringing up in every policy meeting and fairly routinely. You can argue that every time it focuses on one thing. This time the focus was on some areas of NBFCs where they have some concerns, but they were very careful and they did make it very clear that they did not think it was a systemic issue. I think they just thought it was in some pockets and they wanted to make sure that they highlight it and make sure that people take corrective actions. I think this is what a responsible central bank does, right? When you're seeing financial conditions are loose, you just don't want bubbles to be formed anywhere. And in your policy meeting where so many people tune in, you make sure you call these out. So my sense is it's a part of that exercise, as in this is exactly what a central bank should be doing and RBI is doing it.
Okay. Pranjal, my final question really is what will surprise you in the next 3 to 6 months, either on the policy front or on the global front? Because we seem to be working with set templates now. There is geopolitics which is on. It is not inflating crude prices to a great extent, but maybe some spurts there, and that has implications for India. Does it have policy implications or no, remains to be seen. So my question to you is, when you look at the entire canvas of events and developments and policy actions around us, as somebody who looks at India, Indonesia, and maybe the rest of Asia, what would surprise you the most over the course of the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, I think two gradual pivots are happening. One pivot is that, the central bank policy, which was influenced a lot by global events, is on the margin now getting more influenced by domestic events. For example, the balance between inflation and growth rather than what is happening in the Fed. And the reason for that is now we've built ourselves this large amount of FX reserves, which allows us to focus more inwardly rather than constantly looking at what's happening around the world. So this one small pivot from global to domestic, I think, is happening. It's on the margin. The second pivot that's happening is within domestic considerations, from inflation to more growth. All this while RBI has been extremely concerned about inflation, the fact that inflation has been higher than the 4% target. Of course, that still remains a very important part of the RBI policy meeting, and the governor kept talking about it yesterday as well. But what's come up now, which was not there, till about last policy meeting, is this concern on growth, that some indicators are softening. And I think this is another small pivot, that is happening at this point of time. I'm going to focus on these two pivots, as in I'm going to focus on the fact that the global does not change in a meaningful way, that RBI has to go back to being more vigilant on the global front rather than domestic. And internally, inflation should not really spike up, or growth should not really spike up, that RBI thinks more about inflation management rather than trying to give a push to growth at this point of time. These are the two pivots, and I would just be focusing on these pivots.
Got it. Pranjul, such a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for being with us and giving us your thoughts. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
All right, and we stick with, of course, so that's the economic part of the commentary. But today's a day beyond economics, beyond business as well, because truly, the legend of the Indian corporate sector, a doyen like maybe none other, and somebody who built out a legacy that will last beyond him for decades and decades to come. Ratan Tata is no more, Tamanna Johnson as well, and it's just a day wherein we as journalists take a step back from monitoring the day-to-day, the minute-to-minute, the second-to-second events in the market, and try and make a feeble attempt at describing the greatness of this legend. And Tamanna, words fail me, words I'm sure fail you, and words would fail probably a lot of others, but it's been a great morning, Tamanna, in that the kind of memories that people have shared with us on NDTV Profit have been very, very special.
Oh, you know, the thing about covering Ratan Tata today, and it's how everyone feels like he was somehow a part of their consciousness, life and existence. And this is strange. I've been speaking, Niraj, with some of our younger colleagues who would have never had the opportunity to track Ratan Tata and his element as executing the vision of his group. But everyone knows him. Yeah. Everyone has felt today like they have lost someone they know. And I think that is, I mean, that would be, I can safely say, his biggest achievement and something he has wanted. Because if you look at the few interviews that he has done, he has said, I want to be remembered as someone who made a difference. Yeah. Dignified in his silence, let his work speak for him. And of course, there have been so many tough times that they have gone through as well, as you do in such a long life, in such a storied career. But right now, the way his whole outlook has been so inclusive. Even today, he is having a multi-faith service. If you can see on that screen behind you, there's a multi-faith service for his final journey. The remains being taken to NCPA, and for anyone from Mumbai or those who are not in Mumbai, NCPA is like a little jewel in Mumbai's cultural landscape, something created by the Tatas as a cocoon to showcase the best in a non-commercial way. They have created spaces like that for animals. Look at the lines outside the Tata Cancer Hospital, where they do so much work for free, take care of so many people without any commercial cause to it. I mean, these are the things we'll be remembered for at the end of it. Yeah. Inclusivity, real greatness.
And, you know, not just in words, but in actions, right? 66% of Tata Sons equity held by Tata Trusts and dividends flowing directly to support philanthropic work of the trust just shows that it was an act which followed words and just what the gentleman thought like. I mean, he just... there was a belief of not just working for profits, which is, of course, what businesses should strive to do, yes, but also for the country. I mean, the things that they've done is just quite special, Tamanna. Okay, we will, of course, talk to our colleagues who are present at various locations. I think Shubhna Sheikh is at NCPA right now, joins in. And Shubhna, just take a moment and just talk to us about what's happening there.
Yes, so right now it's pretty crowded here. Ratan Tata's body is said to have arrived, and a couple of industrialists CEOs of big companies, Chief Minister Eknath Shinde, Home Minister Amit Shah is likely to arrive here to pay respects, to Ratan Tata. And security is said to have been quite tight. The crowd is growing, as per the minute. Right now, there are about over 100 people said to have been here. So yes, there are a lot of people gathering here to pay their respects to Ratan Tata.
Shubhana, how can people come and pay respects? What I found very heartwarming is that NCPA is going to be the place where even the public can come and pay their respects. Of course, we will see a whole host of VVIPs, top leaders of the country, political, corporate, from every walk of life coming in. But this is also somewhere where the common man, woman can come in and pay their respects today?
Yes, it seems like, the security is pretty tight, but they have made certain arrangements where a common public can enter. The security is tight in terms of they're checking common people's ID cards and letting them in accordingly. And they have also kept guardrails where people can, stand and pay their respects from afar, to Ratan Tata. So yes, a lot of people are expected to gather in as slowly as the crowd moves in.
I believe that after 4 o'clock, as I understand, after 4 o'clock, we will have it open for the public. So you are going to have an opportunity for the common public to also come in and pay their respects. But, Shubhana, thank you for that. And of course, we'll keep taking updates on the kind of arrangements being made there, the people coming in. And I'm sure you will be speaking to a lot of people today who are coming in and paying their respects. What I found very interesting, Niraj, when you look back at the kind of legacy and creation, all the moves, and not all of them worked. Nano, in all senses, was not a successful venture, but the thought behind it. And if you remember the quote from Mr. Ratan Tata, that he saw a family of 4 on a two-wheeler and said that I must build a vehicle for an Indian family to travel safely, and it must be cheap, it must be affordable, and hence came the Nano. It didn't work is a different question.
Exactly, the thought behind it. I still remember, Tamanna, when the price point was announced, and we were covering that, right? When the price point of Nano was announced, he mentioned that it is sub 1 lakh and said that a promise is a promise. I think that was a telling part of what he, of course, believed in, if you will. And I think that is something that we have to, everybody has to learn from. I mean, so many of his things, right? So he mentioning that I don't believe in taking right decisions. I take decisions and then make them right. And I think JLR is a classic example of that. When JLR came in and they bought JLR, it was fraught with risks. It was an expensive, for their size, an expensive deal as well. For the longest time, JLR didn't show the merit. And then Tata Motors has all been about the JLR story. So, I mean, trust, as Mukund Rajan was saying, that once the domestic turf was guarded well enough, I think they moved on and took global wings and really put India on the global map. And Tamanna, from iconic hotels to deals or companies which are on a global landscape, it's quite stunning really what the Tata Group has done under his stewardship.
Yeah, and Sajith on the phone line with us, and he's tracked this group so closely. Sajith, you're heading to the NCPA, from where I'm sure we will hear many voices through the day. Before we get to your sort of experience and reading on Ratan Tata's journey, just explain to us what the arrangements are. Is there a possibility for admirers of him to come and pay respects?
That is right. I know his body has just arrived at NCPA Gardens. It will be kept there for public to pay the last respect. We estimate that almost all the Tata Group employees have been informed that they can go and pay the last respect to Ratan Tata, and so we expect a lot of employees also and public coming in to pay that respect there. If for the viewers, it's the entire NDTV area is on the Marine Drive, just adjacent to Trident and Oberoi. And that entire area has been blocked for vehicles, and there's no parkings which are available, which is at this point in time there. But we are just seeing a lot of people now walking in to pay the last respect to Mr. Ratan Tata.
Okay, and I'm sure it's an occasion. I mean, it's something that everybody, Sajid, because you've tracked this so closely, and you would probably have memories of Bombay House out there, and you are going to another iconic place, which is kind of the cornerstone of the Tata presence in Mumbai as well, filled with people from all walks of life. Sajid, anything else, Sajid, that comes top of your mind?
Yeah, yes, NCPA is another, I would say iconic building in Mumbai, which has been created for art and culture by the Tata Group. And we are seeing a lot of people now gathering on Marine Drive, walking towards NCPA. It's a little walk inside, but they're walking there, and I think we will soon see a lot of VVIPs and industry leaders coming to pay the last respect as well. The body would be kept there till 3:30, and I think by 4 is when the final journey will begin from NCPA to Worli Crematorium.
Just talking a bit about the ceremony that we are seeing on our screens right now, and we just saw Deputy Chief Ministers of Maharashtra. We saw Ajit Pawar there as well, paying respects. Last night itself, you had the top guard of the Maharashtra government going into the hospital at Breach Candy and paying his respects. And this is something that the family wants to make sure that everyone manages to come and pay their respects, isn't it? Is that the kind of arrangement that has been thought out of?
That's true. Mr. Tata has been very closely associated with Mumbai as well, right? We have seen his group doing a lot of contribution for Mumbai, and that's what is coming in. As we were discussing in the morning as well with Mukund and Mr. Tamanna, the entire reach and spread of Tata Group and the impact on the life of common man has been there. And his philanthropic activities have also touched many people across the board. And that's what is driving this respect that many people are now doing it. As we speak, the crowds are swelling in. And I think we will see a huge crowd in some time because his body is already here, and now the entire process of paying last respect is going to begin.
Yeah, fair point, Sajid. We will, of course, leave you, but thanks so much for joining us and giving us some of those memories as well. It's just, sometimes all of us, while doing these pieces as well, I get speechless because it's just that kind of a loss. When I think, Tamanna, I don't know how you think about this, but when I think about Shri Ratan Tata, it's always about, so think of it this way, right? After like Mukund Rajan said, guarding the domestic turf and putting it in that global map, in the last few years, he assumed the role of an investor into startups as well. Maybe that's why his persona resonated with all ages, because he practically did all of these things in a first-hand fashion. It was never that the Tata Trust or one of the large Tata Group companies is investing into some startups. It is Ratan Tata's entity which is also reviewing startups. And I remember the valuations of some of those startups also buzzed when his name got associated. So in some sense, an investing career of sorts or a business career which really was contemporary in the truest sense. And that is something that not too many corporate leaders can boast of, and certainly not too many corporate leaders of this size and stature. So in some sense, a very special corporate doyen who India sadly has lost.
You know what I found very interesting is his excitement about startups and the kinds of companies that he looked at. And if you go through some of his earlier interviews, he did an interview, of course, with the NDTV network soon after he retired, and he was asked, so what are you going to do now after retirement? What's the plan? And he says, what's the point of retirement if I have to plan what to do next? So he was giving the impression that it's going to be very relaxed. But having said that, he has been so active in terms of the number of startups that have been incubated, that have been managed by him and invested in him. And the reason for that is also interesting. If you hear other interviews of his, where he talks about, I want to come in and create space for those businesses which otherwise would have seemed commercially unviable. So after a lifetime of creating wealth for the nation largely, to come and create businesses or help businesses which serve the greater good. That's really what Ratan Tata has come in and done. And what I also found very interesting, Niraj, is the kind of activity on Instagram, on Twitter, and now X, of course. I mean, always very on the ball, possibly had someone helping him with it, I'm not sure, but completely clued in and wanting to engage with people at large. Yes, I don't think he enjoyed speaking to journalists too much, but definitely wanted to engage with the public at large, wanted to stay on top of things, and was very, very clear that he had to preserve the culture of the Tatas. And that's the thing, right? You have a brand name with the greatest credibility.
Most certainly. Brand name with greatest credibility, and for the longest time asked any global investor about the comfort of investing in a Tata Group company, and that per se will not get shaken, which is a great thing about the thing that Tatas have built. Now, maybe you could argue that it's ingrained in that name and the culture, and therefore, but it takes the steward of the ship or the captain of the ship to make sure that that stays when he's the captain. And for the longest time, Mr. Ratan Tata was the captain of that ship personally, and it showed in the way that the company stuck to those roots while it took global ambitions and flew higher. I mean, for me as well, Tamanna, just this intense desire to see Air India fly and fly well was yet another thing, and they've taken those steps as well, and let's see where this goes, but they've taken those steps to ensure that Air India revival is also in process. So it's quite special really to see all that's happened with him being at the helm of affairs, and then his deputed people being at the helm of affairs as well, Tamanna.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other important thing to remember is the idea of getting some of the largest brands under the Indian flag. Some of these acquisitions, again, in hindsight, Chorus was not great. Jaguar Land Rover also might have been tough. But the idea was to get all of these brands under the Indian flag and fly the Indian flag. And that kind of patriotism, of course, it comes from the Tata legacy, which is Air India into existence. That's why. There was a lot of debate, you would recall, when it came about that the Tatas are getting back into Air India. Aviation is a bad business. Why would you buy an airline? But I suspect that the thought behind it is more than, will this venture make me money? That's not something you see in this day and age. I don't know if you're going to see something like that ever again, frankly, where it's more about philanthropy, more about the greater good. Very, very few, very, very rare examples when business decisions are made on more than what they do for the balance sheet.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. Very rare, probably not just, Tamanna, not just in the Indian context, probably very rare on the global context as well. There are very few leaders of this nature on the global arena, to be very, very honest. But there was a sense of pride in me when there was a St. James Park in the heart of London, or New York having this iconic Taj Hotel, and you realize that people say with pride that, oh, this is an Indian hotel, and it's doing so well relative to some of the other large global chains in a global nation. I mean, it's a small thing compared to the larger acquisitions that the Tata Group did, but it was iconic in its truest sense. So, in some sense, this was truly a remarkable thing that has been built by the Tatas under the stewardship of Sri Ratan Tata. National icon, industry leader, yes, Ratan Tata. Sadly, he's no more. Let's just wait and watch for the times to come.
A well-led life, a long life, but even so, I think a life that should be celebrated. Yes, there is mourning, but there is remembrance and there is celebration of what Mr. Ratan Tata has achieved through his journey and the focus that has been there, and going through all of the ups and downs as well, when they had to make these difficult acquisitions, sometimes getting the funding in place for that has been a huge challenge as well. Question on what is the succession plan. They have said that in such clarity. In fact, Gurcharan Das is with us to speak more on the life and times of Mr. Ratan Tata. Mr. Das, thank you so much for joining us here, as we go through those final rites, and we're looking at live pictures of those final rites. And what strikes me is the kind of overwhelming emotion and love that people have for Ratan Tata who have never known him, but know somehow that their lives were touched by him.
I think it is worth mourning, but his life is worth mourning because he was the leader of an institution that we all admire in India. We don't have enough such institutions. And Tata's is the most respected business group, and it's been that way for 100 years plus. It's the nation's conscience keeper. It stands for integrity, for philanthropy, for professionalism, for taking an Indian company global. And as for Ratan, I feel that perhaps his best contribution was when he was handed over the Tata Group from JRD. There were a bunch of satraps who thought their Tata companies were their own fiefdom. And he brought them, integrated them, and he brought them and showed them the door, because nobody is above an institution. I think that was an important message for Tata Steel in the case of Rusi Modi, Tata Chemicals in the case of Darbari Seth, and Tata Hotels in the case of Ajit Kerkar. By bringing them back into the Tata fold, I think was an important and a very tough contribution that he made. And of course, it was during his time that Tatas went global after the 1991 reforms, and we all are proud of the fact that he bought a lovely car, a Jaguar and a Land Rover, and of course Tetley Tea before that, and then a less successful acquisition of Chorus Steel. But nevertheless, Indian companies, Tata showed the way in many ways.
Absolutely.
For Indian companies.
And the thought of